Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're building in our Minecraft world, while I tell you about someone whose roommate's boyfriend decided boundaries were optional. They basically built their own downfall. Like, imagine tiptoeing into someone's bedroom at 2 in the morning and not considering that phones exist. The confidence alone is wild. Alright, before we jump in, big shout out to everyone who's been showing love in the comments and supporting the channel. You guys are awesome, and it honestly helps more than you think. This story starts with late night visits and uncomfortable comments, but it escalates into something way more disturbing, with evidence that speaks louder than any denial ever could. So grab something warm to drink and settle in, because this one's a ride from start to finish. Living with Sarah was supposed to be one of those perfect roommate situations you hear about, but never actually experience. We'd been best friends since sophomore year of college, had the same taste in music, same sleep schedule, same level of tolerance for dishes sitting in the sink for exactly one day before someone cracked. When we found that two-bedroom apartment just outside the city with rent we could actually afford, it felt like everything was falling into place. For the first few months, it really was perfect. We'd watch terrible reality TV on Thursday nights, meal prep together on Sundays, complain about our jobs over wine that cost $7 a bottle. It was comfortable. It was easy. Then Derek started showing up more often. Sarah had been dating him for about 6 months when we moved in together, and at first his presence seemed totally normal. He'd come over for dinner, play video games in the living room, occasionally stay the night in Sarah's room. Standard boyfriend stuff. I didn't think much of it. He seemed nice enough, always offered to help clean up after we cooked, laughed at my jokes, never hogged the bathroom. If anything, I was happy Sarah had found someone who actually treated her well after her last relationship ended with her ex stealing her cat and blocking her on everything. But somewhere around month 3 of living together, things started shifting in this way I couldn't quite put my finger on at first. Derek began showing up even when Sarah wasn't home yet, letting himself in with the spare key she'd given him, making himself comfortable on our couch like he paid rent. He'd strike up conversations with me that lasted just a little too long, stand just a little too close when we were both in the kitchen. Then came the comments, small ones at first. "You look really good today," he'd say when Sarah was in the shower. "That color really suits you," he'd mention when I walked past in my work clothes. I'd laugh it off, say thanks, try to extract myself from whatever room he was in as quickly as possible without making it weird. I told myself I was overthinking it. He was just being friendly. Maybe he was trying to bond with me because I was Sarah's best friend. Maybe I was reading too much into completely innocent compliments because I'd been single for too long and forgot how normal people interact. So I didn't say anything to Sarah. I didn't want to create problems where there weren't any. Didn't want to be that roommate who made everything awkward over nothing. Then one night I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. My room was dark except for the blue glow of my alarm clock reading 2:17 in the morning. For a second I thought maybe I'd imagined it, that I was still half asleep and confused. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Quiet, deliberate footsteps moving across my carpet toward my bed. My heart was hammering so hard I thought whoever it was could probably hear it. I kept my eyes barely open, just slits, trying to see without being obvious that I was awake. And that's when I saw him, Derek, standing at the foot of my bed in nothing but his boxers, illuminated by the hall light behind him. Every muscle in my body went rigid. My phone was tucked under my pillow where I always kept it, and somehow, operating purely on instinct and adrenaline, I managed to slide my hand under there without moving the rest of my body. My fingers found the phone, found the side button, found the camera app I'd programmed to quick launch. I hit record and angled it just enough to capture what was happening without him noticing the screen glow. He was tiptoeing closer now, moving around the side of my bed toward where my head was. I could hear him breathing. I could hear him whisper my name, soft and testing, like he was checking if I was really asleep. Then I felt it, his hand reaching for my blanket, starting to pull it back slowly, carefully. The footage was capturing everything, his face, his intentions, the way he was literally trying to get into bed with his girlfriend's best friend while she slept 20 feet away in the next room. That's when I pretended to wake up screaming. Not a horror movie scream, but loud enough that it would wake Sarah, loud enough that Derek would have to explain what he was doing in my room in his underwear at 2 in the morning. He jumped back like I'd electrocuted him, stumbling over his own feet, hands up like he was surrendering. "Whoa, whoa, it's just me," he said, and the audacity of that statement, like his presence in my room was somehow supposed to be comforting. I think I was sleepwalking. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Sarah burst through my door about 3 seconds later, eyes wild, hair everywhere, clearly panicked by the sound of me screaming. What happened? What's wrong? She asked, looking between me and Derek, who was now backing toward the door, trying to look as confused and innocent as possible. I don't know. I think I was sleepwalking, he said again, really committing to that story. I must have gotten turned around, thought this was the bathroom that was in the complete opposite direction and also didn't require him to approach someone's bed to access it. I didn't say anything that night. I was shaking too hard, too shocked, too busy trying to process what had just happened. Sarah ushered Derek out of my room, apologizing profusely, saying he'd been stressed at work and sometimes did weird things in his sleep. I locked my door after they left, spent the rest of the night watching that video over and over again, making sure it was clear, making sure it showed what I thought it showed. It did. The next morning I waited until Derek left for work. Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee, humming along to some song on her phone, completely oblivious. I sat down across from her at our little breakfast table and pulled up the video. Sarah, I said, I need you to watch something. The color drained from her face as she watched. I could see her trying to process it, trying to reconcile the Derek she thought she knew with the Derek on my phone screen, whispering my name, reaching for my blanket. For a moment I thought she got it. Her eyes filled with tears. Her hand went to her mouth. She looked at me with this expression of horror and betrayal, and I thought, okay, she understands, she sees what he did, we're going to get through this together. But that wasn't even the worst part. Then came the breaking point. She put my phone down, wiped her eyes, and looked at me with something that wasn't sympathy or support or solidarity. It was accusation. How long has this been going on? She asked, voice tight. I blinked, confused. How long has what been going on? Sarah, he came into my room. He tried to... She cut me off. You must have been leading him on. You must have given him some kind of signal that this was okay. Derek wouldn't just do this out of nowhere. I sat there completely stunned, unable to form words. She kept going. I've seen how you dress around the apartment. I've seen how you laugh at his jokes. You probably wanted this to happen. You're probably jealous that I have someone and you don't. Each sentence was like a slap. My best friend, the person who'd helped me through my worst breakup, who I'd stayed up with during her panic attacks, who I trusted enough to live with, was now accusing me of seducing her boyfriend. The boyfriend who'd literally crept into my room in the middle of the night. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you were watching from in the comments below. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what happens next because this story is just the beginning of tonight's absolute madness. So there I was, phone in hand, watching my so-called best friend defend the guy who literally tried to climb into my bed. But that confrontation? That was nothing compared to what happened next. I moved out within a week, crashed on my sister's couch while I looked for a new place, took only what I could fit in my car during one trip, while Sarah was at work because I couldn't stand to be in the same room with her anymore. But before I left, I did one thing. I posted that video in our friend group chat, the one with all our college friends, all our mutual friends, everyone who knew both Sarah and me, and had met Derek at various gatherings over the past year. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. The video spoke for itself. Derek in his boxers creeping into my room, whispering my name, reaching for my blanket. The timestamp showing 2:17 in the morning. The audio of me screaming, of him claiming he was sleepwalking. I just wrote, "This happened last night. Thought everyone should know what kind of person Derek actually is." The response was immediate and nuclear. Our friends were horrified. Messages started flooding in. People asking if I was okay. People saying they'd always thought Derek was weird. People apologizing for not seeing the signs sooner. 3 different friend groups banned Derek from their events, their parties, their group chats. Mutual friends who'd met him through Sarah stopped inviting her to things if there was any chance she'd bring him. His reputation was destroyed in the span of about 48 hours. You'd think that would be the end of it. You'd think Sarah would see the unanimous reaction from everyone we knew and realize she'd made a terrible mistake in defending him. But no, last I heard through the grapevine, she's still with him. They moved to a different apartment, apparently, isolated themselves from most of our friend group. She's convinced everyone turned on her, that I manipulated the narrative, that the video doesn't show what it clearly shows. Part of me feels bad for her. Part of me knows she's been gaslit so thoroughly by Derek that she can't see reality anymore. But the larger part of me, the part that still remembers her calling me a seductress while I showed her proof of her boyfriend's betrayal, that part feels absolutely nothing. I protected myself. I told the truth. I made sure other people knew what he was capable of. If she wants to stay with someone who creeps into other women's rooms at night, that's her choice to make and her consequences to live with. I'm in a new apartment now, living alone, sleeping with my door locked even though I'm the only one with a key, still friends with most of our original group, the ones who believe me immediately, who cut Derek out without hesitation. Sarah and I haven't spoken since the day I moved out. I don't think we ever will again. Some friendships don't survive betrayal, and this one died the moment she chose to believe his lie over my evidence. The thing nobody tells you about situations like this is that sometimes the person who hurts you isn't the obvious villain. Sometimes it's the person you trusted to have your back, the person you thought would always believe you, the person who looks at clear proof of someone's terrible behavior and decides you must have deserved it somehow. That cuts deeper than any creep ever could, but Derek wasn't the only family member who couldn't keep his hands to himself. My own brother-in-law decided to cross a line that would blow up two families at once. My sister Emma's wedding was one of those events that people still talk about years later. 300 guests, a string quartet, centerpieces that cost more than my monthly rent, the works. She'd been planning it since she was probably 12 years old, had binders full of magazine clippings and color swatches and seating chart iterations. When she met Josh in grad school, it was like every piece of her perfect life puzzle finally clicked into place. He was everything she'd ever wanted. Successful financial analyst, came from a good family, had that polished charm that made parents immediately love him. He was attentive, remembered everyone's birthdays, brought wine to family dinners, asked my dad about his golf game, the kind of guy who seemed almost too perfect, but in a way that made you think maybe some people really do just have it all figured out. I was her maid of honor, wore the dusty rose dress she'd picked out, gave a speech at the reception that made half the room cry, caught the bouquet when she threw it directly at me with the accuracy of a professional quarterback. I was genuinely happy for her. Emma had always been the responsible one, the one who made good choices, who dated guys our parents approved of, who never caused drama. She deserved this fairy tale, and for 3 years it really seemed like she had it. Josh integrated into our family seamlessly. He showed up to every holiday, every birthday dinner, every random Sunday brunch my mum insisted on hosting. He and Emma bought a house in a neighborhood with good schools, even though they didn't have kids yet. They took couples vacations to places like Napa and Charleston. Their social media was a highlight reel of wine tastings and anniversary dinners and renovations on their kitchen. From the outside, they were the couple everyone else measured their relationship against. I saw Josh fairly regularly at family events, and he was always friendly in that surface level, way brothers-in-law tend to be. We'd make small talk about work. He'd ask how my dating life was going in that slightly awkward way men do when they're trying to be polite. We'd laugh at the same jokes during family game nights. Normal. Unremarkable. I never thought twice about him beyond being grateful that Emma had found someone who made her happy. Then came their Christmas party last year. Emma went all out like she always did, decorated their entire house like a Pottery Barn catalogue, hired a bartender, made enough food to feed a small army. I showed up early to help her set up, stayed late because I'd been drinking and didn't want to drive. The party was winding down around 11. Most people had already left, and I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher while Emma walked the last few guests to their cars. That's when Josh appeared in the doorway. He'd had a few drinks, not sloppy drunk, but definitely loosened up, tie undone, sleeves rolled up. He leaned against the door frame and watched me for a second before saying anything. You know, you've really matured over the past few years. The comment felt off immediately, the way he said it, the way he was looking at me. I laughed it off, made some joke about finally learning how to dress myself. Kept loading dishes. He moved closer, picked up a wine glass from the counter, like he was going to help, but just stood there holding it. I've always wondered what if, you know, If I'd met you first instead of Emma. My entire body went cold. I stopped what I was doing, turned to look at him, tried to figure out if I'd misheard or misunderstood. But no. He was looking at me with this expression that made my skin crawl, something between nostalgia and desire, like he'd been thinking about this for a while. Josh, what are you talking about? I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to give him an out to walk this back and pretend it never happened. He set the wine glass down, took another step closer. Too close. Close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. Come on, don't act like you haven't thought about it too. I see the way you look at me at family dinners. I absolutely had not been looking at him any kind of way at family dinners, except maybe wondering why he always took the last dinner role. This was insane. This was my sister's husband, standing in my sister's kitchen at my sister's Christmas party, suggesting there was some kind of mutual attraction that had literally never existed anywhere, except apparently in his delusional head. I started to back up, but I was already against the counter with nowhere to go. He reached out, put his hand on my waist and said, "Emma doesn't have to know." That's when my brain kicked back into gear. I'd been in a bad situation with an ex a couple years back, the kind that taught me to always be ready to document things, to have proof when someone tried to rewrite reality later. My phone was in my pocket. I managed to pull it out, hit the voice recording app I kept on my home screen, and slid it back into my pocket with the microphone exposed. "Josh, you need to back up right now," I said, loud and clear for the recording. He smiled like I was playing hard to get. Just one kiss, just to see what it would be like. Then he actually tried to kiss me, leaned in like this was some romantic moment and not a complete violation of every boundary that exists between family members. I shoved him back so hard he stumbled into the counter behind him, knocked over someone's half-empty cocktail. "What is wrong with you?" I said, and I was shaking now, adrenaline and disgust and rage all flooding through me at once. "You're married to my sister. You're my brother-in-law. This is never going to happen." And here's where it gets absurd. The exact moment I finished that sentence, Emma walked back into the kitchen. She looked between us, saw Josh against the counter, saw me on the other side of the kitchen, breathing hard, clearly upset. For a split second, I saw confusion on her face, saw her trying to process the scene in front of her. Josh didn't even hesitate, didn't miss a beat. He immediately flipped the entire script. "Emma, thank God you're back," he said, running his hand through his hair like he was the one who'd been accosted. "Your sister has been flirting with me all night. I came in here to get away from the party for a minute and she followed me. Started saying all these things about how she's always been attracted to me, how she wishes we'd met first." I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the sheer audacity of him trying to gaslight both of us in real time was so outrageous my brain couldn't process it any other way. Emma's face went from confused to hurt to angry in about 3 seconds, but I couldn't tell who the anger was directed at. "That's interesting," I said, pulling my phone back out of my pocket, "because I've been recording this entire conversation." I hit play. The audio quality was perfect, crystal clear. Josh's voice saying I'd matured, saying he'd always wondered what if, saying Emma doesn't have to know, my voice telling him to back up. The sound of him stumbling into the counter after I shoved him. Everything. Emma's face went completely white. She looked at Josh like she was seeing him for the first time. Like the person standing in her kitchen was a complete stranger. "Get out," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Josh started stammering, started trying to explain, started saying the recording didn't capture the full context, that I must have said something before I started recording. "Get out of my house," Emma said again, louder this time, "right now." He left, grabbed his coat and left his own Christmas party, left his own house. Emma and I sat on her kitchen floor until 3 in the morning while she cried, and I told her everything that had happened, played her the recording again, answered every question she had. She kept apologizing to me, which felt backwards because none of this was her fault. She'd married someone who turned out to be a different person than he'd pretended to be. That's not on her. That's on him for being a liar. The divorce papers were filed within a month. Emma's lawyer was ruthless. She got the house, got most of their savings, got everything she was entitled to, and then some. But that wasn't even the worst part for Josh. Emma's lawyer was friends with someone at Josh's company. Word got around about why they were getting divorced. The audio recording somehow made its way to HR. Josh's firm had a very strict ethics policy about conduct that could reflect poorly on the company. Trying to hook up with your wife's sister at a family event apparently qualified. He was asked to resign. Our parents tried to blame me at first. My mum actually suggested that maybe I had been sending mixed signals, that maybe Josh misread my friendliness. My dad said I should have just kept quiet and let Emma and Josh work it out privately, that I'd ruined the marriage by recording him and making a big deal out of it. Like I'd ruined the marriage. Like Josh trying to cheat on their daughter with their other daughter wasn't the thing that ruined the marriage. Emma shut that down immediately, told them in no uncertain terms that if they wanted a relationship with her going forward, they needed to accept that Josh was the villain in this story, not me. They came around eventually, apologized, but it took them a while to get there, and I'm not sure I've fully forgiven them for their initial reaction. Emma's doing better now. Sold the house, moved into a condo downtown, started therapy, started dating again. She thanks me sometimes for having that recording, says it made the divorce process cleaner because Josh couldn't contest anything when there was audio proof of what he'd done, says it gave her clarity when she needed it most. Josh lost pretty much everything. His wife, his house, his job, his reputation in our social circle. Last I heard, he moved to a different state, trying to start over where nobody knows his story. Part of me feels like that's exactly what he deserves. The larger part of me just feels tired. Tired of men who think they can rewrite reality to suit their narrative. Tired of people who choose to believe the lie over the evidence. Tired of having to protect myself with recordings and screenshots, because simply telling the truth isn't enough anymore. But at least Emma got out. At least she knows who he really was before they had kids. Before she wasted more years on someone who saw her family as a dating pool. That recording saved her from a lifetime of wondering if she'd made the right choice to leave. Sometimes the truth is brutal, but it's still better than living in a beautiful lie. Josh wasn't the only person who thought Thanksgiving dinner was the perfect time to detonate someone's life, because what I did next made his confession look tame. My sister Lauren's husband Mark had always been the kind of guy who made family gatherings slightly uncomfortable in ways you couldn't quite articulate. He'd hug just a second too long. He'd compliment your outfit with a little too much detail. He'd find excuses to sit next to you at dinner and lean in close when he talked. For years I wrote it off as him just being overly friendly, maybe a little socially awkward. The kind of person who didn't quite understand personal space boundaries. Lauren seemed happy, so I never said anything. Why create problems where there weren't any, right? But about 6 months before last Thanksgiving, things shifted from vaguely uncomfortable to actively weird. Mark started texting me out of nowhere. Nothing scandalous at first, just, "Hey, how was your day?" and "saw this meme and thought of you" type messages. The kind of thing that would be normal from a friend but felt slightly off coming from my brother-in-law. Then the messages got more personal. He'd ask about my dating life, whether I was seeing anyone, whether I was happy. He'd send me songs and say they reminded him of me. He'd like every single Instagram post I made within minutes of posting. The hugs at family dinners got longer. The eye contact got more intense. He started showing up to events early, clearly trying to get time alone with me before Lauren arrived. I started making excuses to leave rooms when he entered them, started responding to his texts with one-word answers, started avoiding family gatherings altogether when I could. But I still didn't say anything to Lauren. What would I even say? Your husband is being weird to me but hasn't actually done anything concrete. She'd probably think I was overreacting, reading too much into innocent behavior. Then, one Tuesday night in October, my doorbell rang at 9:30. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked my phone, saw the doorbell camera notification, and my stomach dropped. It was Mark, standing on my porch, swaying slightly, clearly drunk. I didn't open the door, just watched him through the camera as he knocked again, as he called my name, as he started crying. "Please," he said to my closed door, "I just need to talk to you. I need to explain." I still didn't open it, pulled out my phone and made sure the doorbell camera was recording everything, a lesson I'd learned from too many true crime podcasts about always having evidence. He kept talking. "I've been in love with you for years, since before I married Lauren. I thought if I married her, I could get over it, that being close to you through her would be enough. But it's not. I made a mistake. We're meant to be together. You have to feel it too." The level of delusion was actually impressive in a horrifying way. He'd married my sister while being in love with me, had spent years at family dinners and holidays pretending everything was normal, had built an entire life with her while apparently fantasizing about me the whole time. And now he was on my porch at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, drunk and crying, expecting me to what? Confess I'd been harboring secret feelings for him too? Run away together and blow up both our relationships with Lauren? Mark, you need to leave, I said through the door, loud enough for the camera to pick up. Go home to your wife, get yourself together. This is never going to happen. He started sobbing harder, saying I didn't understand, that he'd tried to fight it but couldn't anymore, that Lauren deserved to know the truth. The truth is you're drunk and you're not thinking clearly, I said. Leave now or I'm calling the police. He finally left. Stumbled down my porch steps, got in his car, drove away. I immediately saved the doorbell footage to 3 different places, sent it to my personal email, backed it up to cloud storage. Then I sat on my couch trying to figure out what to do with this information that had just exploded into my life like a grenade. Mark started texting me the next morning, long paragraphs about how sorry he was, how he shouldn't have come over like that, how he was going to get help. Then messages begging me not to tell Lauren, saying it would destroy her, that he'd do anything to keep this between us, like we were co-conspirators in his betrayal of my sister. Like I owed him my silence. I didn't respond to any of them, but I also didn't tell Lauren. I kept thinking about how to do it, what words to use, how to show her without completely destroying her. Days turned into weeks. Mark kept texting, alternating between apologetic and desperate. I kept the doorbell footage saved but didn't do anything with it. Kept showing up to family events and pretending everything was fine while Mark played the doting husband, and I felt like I was going to throw up every time I looked at them together. Then Thanksgiving came. My parents hosted like they do every year. The whole family gathered, cousins and aunts and uncles, and everyone packed into their dining room. Lauren and Mark showed up together, holding hands, Lauren laughing at something he said. They looked happy. She looked happy. And Mark looked at me across the room with this pleading expression, like he was begging me to keep his secret, to let him keep playing this role. We all sat down for dinner. My dad started carving the turkey, making jokes about how he'd perfected his technique over the years. My mom brought out side dishes. Everyone was talking and laughing and passing plates. Normal, peaceful, everything a Thanksgiving dinner should be. And I looked at Mark smiling at Lauren, touching her hand, kissing her cheek, and something in me just snapped. This is where patience finally snapped. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't sit there and watch him pretend to be this perfect husband while I knew the truth. Couldn't protect his secret while my sister lived in ignorance. Couldn't let another holiday pass with this lie sitting in the middle of the table like a bomb nobody else could see. Hey everyone, I said, loud enough that conversation stopped. Can we pause for just a second? There's something I need to show Lauren. My mum looked confused. My dad stopped mid-carving. Lauren looked at me with this innocent curiosity, probably thinking I'd gotten her an early Christmas present or something sweet. I pulled out my phone, navigated to the doorbell footage, and airplayed it to my parents' TV. The video started playing. Mark on my porch, swaying drunk, crying, confessing his love, saying he'd married the wrong sister, saying we were meant to be together. The audio was crystal clear. Everyone in that dining room heard every word. The silence was deafening. 20 people frozen mid-bite, mid-sip, mid-conversation. All eyes went from the TV to Mark, to me, to Lauren. Her face went through about 15 emotions in 5 seconds. Confusion, realization, hurt, betrayal, rage. She stood up, grabbed her wine glass, and threw the contents directly in Mark's face. Red wine dripping down his shocked expression, staining his white button-down shirt. You have 10 seconds to get out of this house before I do something I'll regret, Lauren said, voice shaking but controlled. Mark started stammering, started trying to explain, started saying the video didn't show the full context. Get out, my dad said, standing up now too. You heard her. Leave. Mark left, just grabbed his coat and walked out the front door, wine-stained and humiliated, while 20 family members watched in complete silence. The moment the door closed, chaos erupted, but not the kind I expected. My mum turned to me with this horrified expression. How could you do this? She asked. How could you ruin Thanksgiving like this? This was supposed to be a nice family dinner and you just destroyed it. My dad agreed. Said I should have handled this privately, that there was a time and place for this kind of revelation, and the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, wasn't it? Said I'd been selfish and dramatic and attention-seeking. I sat there completely stunned. My sister's husband had just confessed to being in love with me for years, had admitted he married her under false pretenses, and somehow I was the villain for exposing it? The mental gymnastics required to make me the bad guy in this scenario was actually kind of impressive. But Lauren stood up, walked over to me, and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for telling me. Thank you for not letting me keep living a lie." She was crying, mascara running down her face, but she was also somehow relieved. Like she'd known something was wrong but couldn't name it, and now she finally had answers. The divorce papers were filed before Christmas. Lauren's lawyer had a field day with the doorbell footage. Mark tried to contest it, tried to claim I'd manipulated him somehow, but there's not really a defense for showing up drunk at your sister-in-law's house confessing your love. Lauren got the house, got most of their assets, got everything she asked for because Mark's lawyer basically told him to take whatever deal he could get and count himself lucky. My parents eventually apologized for their initial reaction. Took them a few months, but they got there. Admitted they'd been more worried about appearances and family harmony than about Lauren's actual well-being. That the optics of a dramatic Thanksgiving revelation had bothered them more than the substance of what had been revealed. We're working on rebuilding that trust. Lauren's thriving now. She's dating someone new, just got a promotion at work, bought herself a condo with the divorce settlement. She told me last week that finding out the truth, even though it hurt, was the best thing that could have happened to her. That she'd wasted enough years with someone who was never fully committed to her. Mark? Last I heard, he's living in his mum's basement, working a job that pays half what he used to make, still sending me occasional texts that go straight to my blocked folder. He lost his wife, his house, his dignity, and the respect of everyone who knew him, all because he couldn't keep his delusions to himself. The thing is, I don't regret showing that video at Thanksgiving. Would it have been more polite to pull Lauren aside privately? Sure. Would it have been less dramatic to handle it quietly? Absolutely. But Mark had been lying to her for years. He'd been lying to all of us. And sometimes the truth needs to be public, needs to be undeniable, needs to be shown in a way that doesn't leave room for gaslighting or revision. Apparently, exposing cheaters runs in my blood, because my mum's boyfriend was about to learn that lesson the hard way. My dad died when I was 16. Sudden heart attack, no warning, just gone one Tuesday afternoon while I was at soccer practice. My mum and I kind of collapsed into each other after that, became this unit of two trying to figure out how to exist in a world that felt fundamentally broken. For 5 years, it was just us. We had dinner together most nights, watched terrible reality TV on the couch, talked about everything and nothing. She went to therapy, I went to therapy. We both tried to build something resembling a normal life out of the wreckage. Then she met Carl at some charity gala her work was hosting, which should have been my first red flag, because who actually meets decent people at charity galas? But she seemed happy for the first time in years, started doing her hair differently, smiling at her phone, making plans that didn't revolve around coming home, and microwaving leftovers in silence. I wanted her to be happy. I really did. So when she introduced us at a Sunday brunch, I tried to be open-minded. Carl was everything my dad wasn't. Flashy where my dad had been understated, smooth where my dad had been genuine. The kind of guy who wore a Rolex to a casual brunch and made sure you noticed it. He was divorced, had a boat he mentioned within the first 10 minutes of meeting me. Worked in some vague finance-adjacent field that he described in a way designed to sound impressive without actually explaining what he did. He was charming in that practiced way some men are, like he'd studied a manual on how to make people like him and executed it flawlessly. At first he seemed fine around me, polite, appropriate, the kind of friendly you'd expect from your mum's new boyfriend, trying to make a good impression. He'd ask about my job, remember details from previous conversations, bring wine when he came over for dinner. My mum was glowing. She'd hold his hand across the table, laugh at his jokes, look at him the way she used to look at my dad. I was happy for her, really. But then things started shifting. Small comments at first, the kind you almost convince yourself you misheard. We'd be in the kitchen and Mum would step out to take a phone call, and Carl would say something like, "You've really got your mother's body," while looking at me in a way that made my skin crawl. Or, If I were younger, you'd be in trouble, with this laugh that wasn't quite joking. I'd freeze, make some excuse to leave the room, try to convince myself I was overreacting. It kept happening. Little moments when Mum wasn't in earshot. Comments about how I looked in certain outfits, observations about my dating life that felt too personal. Lingering hugs that lasted a beat too long. I started avoiding being alone with him, timing my visits to my mum's place for when I knew she'd be home the whole time, keeping physical distance between us during family dinners. Finally, I told her. We were having coffee one Saturday morning, just the two of us, and I worked up the courage to say that Carl made me uncomfortable, that some of his comments felt inappropriate, that maybe she should talk to him about boundaries. I expected her to be concerned, protective, maybe a little angry on my behalf. Instead, she laughed, actually laughed, said I was being dramatic, that Carl was just friendly, that he came from a generation where people were more open with compliments, and I was reading too much into it. She said I was probably just not used to having a father figure around anymore, that I was projecting my discomfort with her dating onto him, that I needed to give him a chance because he made her happy, and wasn't that what mattered? I left her apartment feeling crazy, like maybe I was overreacting, like maybe I was inventing problems because some part of me didn't want my mum to move on from my dad. I almost convinced myself she was right. Then Carl made a comment about my legs in a dress I was wearing to a work event, and I knew. I wasn't imagining anything. He was a creep, and my mum either couldn't see it or didn't want to. So I decided to set a trap. I invited both of them over to my apartment for dinner on a Friday night. Spent the afternoon setting up 3 hidden cameras, one in the living room bookshelf angled toward the couch, one in the kitchen tucked behind the coffee maker, one in the hallway hidden in a decorative vase. I tested the angles, made sure the audio was clear, made sure there were no blind spots. If Carl was going to be inappropriate with me, I needed proof. Evidence my mom couldn't dismiss or explain away. They arrived at 7. I made Mom's favorite pasta, opened a bottle of wine, played the role of gracious host. We ate dinner, chatted about nothing important, laughed at some story Carl told about his boat. Around 8:30, I faked a migraine, really sold it, pressed my fingers to my temples, squinted at the light, the whole performance. Mum, I'm so sorry. Could you run to the pharmacy and grab me some of that prescription strength ibuprofen? The one I can never remember the name of? She was up immediately, grabbing her purse, concerned in that way mums are. Of course, honey, I'll be right back. Carl, keep her company. And just like that, she was out the door, leaving me alone with him in my apartment. 3 cameras rolling, my heart pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. Carl waited exactly 4 minutes. I timed it later when I reviewed the footage. 4 minutes of sitting on opposite ends of the couch, making small talk about my job, before he shifted closer. Not dramatically, just sort of slid over one cushion, closing the distance between us. You know, he said, voice dropping lower, more intimate. Your mum is great, but you and I have a special connection, don't you think? I felt nauseous, but I kept my face neutral. Let him keep talking. He moved closer again, put his hand on my knee. The camera in the bookshelf had a perfect view. We could keep secrets, you know, he continued, thumb starting to trace small circles on my leg. What happens between us doesn't have to involve anyone else. I think you're mature enough to understand that. The psychology of it was almost fascinating in a horrifying way. He thought he was being seductive, thought this was working, thought I was going to what? Fall into his arms. Betray my mother? I let him talk himself deeper into the hole, let him move his hand higher, let him lean in closer, let him stroke my hair with his other hand, let him whisper about how he'd been attracted to me since we met. Then I pulled out my phone and texted my mum, "Come back now, please." She walked in maybe 90 seconds later, used her spare key, came around the corner into the living room to find Carl sitting way too close to me, hand in my hair, other hand on my thigh, mid-sentence about how your mum never has to know. He jumped back like he'd been electrocuted, started stammering something about comforting me because of my migraine. I walked over to my laptop sitting on the coffee table, pulled up the camera feeds, all 3 angles, crystal clear footage, perfect audio. Mum, I said, voice steadier than I felt, I need you to watch something. Her face went through about 15 different emotions in the span of 3 minutes. Confusion, denial, horror, rage, betrayal, grief. She watched Carl sit too close, watched him touch me, heard him say we could keep secrets, heard him talk about their relationship like it was just an obstacle to what he really wanted. When the video ended, the room was completely silent except for the sound of her breathing. Carl tried. Give him credit for commitment to the bit. He tried to say the cameras didn't capture the full context, that I'd been flirting with him earlier when the cameras weren't rolling, that this was some kind of setup because I didn't want my mum to be happy. The words were coming out of his mouth, but they sounded hollow even to him, I think. My mum just stared at him like he was a stranger, like the person standing in her daughter's living room was someone she'd never met. "Get out," she said quietly. When he didn't move immediately, she said it again, louder. "Get out of her apartment. Get out of my life. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't ever contact either of us again." He left, tried to take some kind of dignified exit, but mostly just scrambled for the door like the cornered rat he was. The second the door closed behind him, my mum collapsed onto the couch and started crying. Not delicate tears, but these awful broken sobs that shook her whole body. I sat next to her and she grabbed onto me, apologizing over and over. "I'm sorry, I should have believed you. I'm sorry, I should have protected you. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." She apologized for months after that, brought it up constantly, told me she'd failed as a mother, said she should have trusted my instincts over her desire to not be alone. I kept telling her it wasn't her fault that Carl turned out to be a predator, that she couldn't have known, that being lonely after losing my dad didn't make her responsible for his behavior. But I think she needed to sit with that guilt for a while, needed to process what had almost happened because she'd dismissed my concerns. She started therapy again, real intensive therapy, twice a week, working through why she'd been so ready to believe Carl over me, unpacking her fear of being alone, learning to trust her daughter's read on situations. She's better now, not perfect, nobody is, but better. More cautious about who she lets into her life, more willing to listen when something feels off. We never talk about Carl directly. He's just this understanding between us, this lesson learned the hard way. She's dated a little since then, but she introduces me early now, watches how they interact with me, believes me immediately if I say something feels wrong. The cameras are still in my apartment, different locations now, but still there. Some people might think that's paranoid, but I think it's just smart. The world is full of people who will look you in the eye and lie about what they're doing, who will gaslight you into questioning your own reality. Having proof isn't paranoid, it's just being prepared for the fact that some people can't be trusted to tell the truth, even when caught red-handed. Carl's gone. Mum's in therapy, learning to trust her daughter's instincts. And me? I'm okay. Validated, vindicated, and very aware that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who need protecting from their own denial. You'd think learning your mum's boyfriend was a creep would be the worst family betrayal, but then my best friend decided to sleep with my dad and somehow made it even worse. My best friend Melissa and I met in 7th grade when she moved to town halfway through the school year and got assigned the locker next to mine. We became inseparable in that way only middle school best friends can be. The kind of friendship where you talk on the phone for 3 hours even though you just spent the entire day together, where you know each other's families better than your own, where sleepovers happen so frequently your parents set up a permanent sleeping bag in your room. Melissa was at every family dinner, every birthday party, every vacation we took. My parents called her their second daughter. My little brother treated her like an annoying older sister. She was family. We stayed close through high school, went to colleges 2 hours apart, but visited constantly, talked every single day. When my parents announced they were getting divorced during my junior year, Melissa was the first person I called, crying in my dorm room at midnight. She drove up the next morning, skipped her classes, sat with me while I processed the fact that my family was falling apart. She knew how devastating it was. She'd been there for every moment of my childhood, had seen my parents together at their best, understood what I was losing. My dad took the divorce hard, moved into this bachelor pad apartment downtown, started going to the gym obsessively, bought a sports car he absolutely did not need, got a whole new wardrobe of clothes that seemed designed for someone 20 years younger. Classic midlife crisis behavior. I tried to be supportive even though watching your dad transform into a cliché is pretty uncomfortable. He started dating women his own age at first. Nothing serious, just trying to figure out who he was as a single man after 25 years of marriage. Melissa started coming around more after the divorce. At first, I thought she was just being a good friend, checking on my dad, making sure he was okay since she'd known him for so long. She'd ask how he was doing, whether he was adjusting, if he needed anything. Then she started asking if she could visit him directly, said she wanted to drop off some food she'd made, that she was in the neighborhood and thought she'd say hi. I thought it was sweet, thought she was being thoughtful. She started making excuses to visit when I wasn't home, said she was dropping off something for my dad, or picking up something she'd left at his apartment, or just wanted to check in on him. I'd come home to visit and she'd already be there, sitting on his couch, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm in that casual way friends do. My dad seemed to enjoy the company. He'd mentioned Melissa had stopped by, that she was such a nice girl, that I was lucky to have a friend who cared about my family so much. I should have seen it. Looking back, all the signs were there. But you don't expect your best friend to be pursuing your father. That's not a scenario your brain naturally jumps to. So I ignored the weird feeling in my gut, told myself I was being paranoid, that Melissa was just being supportive during a difficult time. Then one Saturday afternoon, I was driving home from the grocery store and saw my dad's very distinctive sports car in the Target parking lot. I pulled in, figured I'd say hi, maybe he'd help me carry groceries or we'd grab lunch. I walked toward his car and that's when I saw them. Melissa and my dad, making out in the front seat like teenagers, his hands in her hair, her legs across his lap. I stood there for probably 10 seconds in complete shock before my brain caught up with what I was seeing. Then I started screaming. Not words, just this primal sound of betrayal and disgust and rage. Security came running. People in the parking lot stopped and stared. Melissa scrambled off my dad's lap, makeup smeared, trying to fix her clothes. My dad had the audacity to look annoyed, like I was the one creating an awkward situation. "Can we talk about this somewhere private?" he said, and I lost it even more. Started yelling about how long this had been going on, how they could do this, what was wrong with both of them. Melissa was crying, saying I didn't understand, that they'd fallen in love, that it just happened and they couldn't help it. Like love was some external force that had possessed them both instead of a series of choices they'd actively made. My dad put his hand on my shoulder, tried to calm me down, said I was being immature about adult relationships, that I needed to accept that he was single now and could date whoever he wanted. The fact that he reduced this to being about his right to date and not about the fundamental betrayal of my best friend pursuing my father was almost impressive in its emotional density. I told them both to stay away from me, got in my car, and left. Blocked Melissa on everything. Told my dad I needed space. Thought maybe they'd realize how messed up this was and end it. But that wasn't even the worst part. 4 months later, I got a text from my little brother with a photo of a wedding invitation. Melissa and my dad, engaged, getting married, and they'd sent me an invitation like this was a normal wedding I'd want to attend. Like I'd be happy to celebrate their relationship that started with them hooking up behind a Target while betraying my trust. The invitation sat on my counter for 2 weeks while I tried to process the sheer audacity. They really thought I'd come. Really thought I'd put on a dress and smile and pretend this was okay. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not just at them, but at the fact that they were going to get their fairy tale wedding while I was supposed to just accept it and move on. So I started going through old messages. Years of texts between Melissa and me, back when my parents were still married, back when my dad was just my dad and not her boyfriend. Found dozens of messages where she'd complained about him. Called him creepy when he'd try to be cool around my friends. Called him pathetic when he'd tell bad jokes at dinner. Made fun of his dad bod and his receding hairline. Talked about how embarrassing it was when he tried to relate to us about music or movies. All the normal things you'd say about your friend's dorky dad. I took screenshots of everything. Made a slideshow. Set it to music. Included dates so everyone could see these were from before they supposedly fell in love. Showed Melissa calling my dad gross. Showing the messages where she'd laugh about how he tried too hard. The ones where she'd complain about having to be nice to him at family dinners. Then I RSVP'd yes to the wedding. The wedding was at this nice outdoor venue, all white chairs and string lights and flowers everywhere. I showed up in black, which felt appropriately funereal for the death of any relationship I'd ever have with either of them. Sat in the back, waited. The ceremony started, everyone standing, Melissa walking down the aisle, in this elaborate white dress, my dad waiting at the altar looking proud. The officiant started talking about love and commitment and partnership. And here's where it gets absurd. Right when the officiant got to the vows, I stood up, walked down the aisle with my laptop. Nobody stopped me. I think everyone was too confused about what was happening. I got to the front, turned to face the guests, and hit play on the slideshow, projected onto my laptop screen that I'd angled toward the crowd. Melissa's text filled the screen. "Your dad is so creepy I can't deal. Why does he always try to be cool? It's pathetic. I'd rather die than spend another dinner listening to his boring stories." Message after message, all time-stamped from when they were supposedly just my friend and my dad. The room went completely silent except for the music I'd set the slideshow to, some ironic love song that made the whole thing even more devastating. Melissa started crying, not the delicate wedding tears, but ugly sobs. My dad's face went red, then white. The officiant just stood there holding his little book, clearly not trained for this scenario. Guests started whispering, pulling out their phones, taking pictures. Half the people there got up and left within 5 minutes, just stood up and walked out like they couldn't be associated with this anymore. Melissa's mum, who was sitting in the front row, looked at her daughter like she was a stranger, stood up, walked past her without saying a word, left the venue. Other family members followed. My dad's side of the family mostly stayed, but you could see the judgment on their faces, the disgust. His brother actually started laughing, this bitter sound that echoed across the suddenly very quiet venue. I closed my laptop and left. Didn't say anything, didn't need to. The slideshow had said everything. I heard later that they went through with the ceremony, finished the vows in front of maybe 30 people who hadn't walked out, had a reception that was supposed to host 200, but served dinner to a handful of uncomfortable guests who felt too awkward to leave. They're married now, living in my dad's apartment, isolated from most of the family and all of their former friends. Melissa's mum hasn't spoken to her in 3 years, won't return her calls, won't acknowledge her birthday, acts like she doesn't have a daughter anymore. My dad's relationship with my brother is strained. He still talks to dad sometimes, but it's surface level, just enough to maintain a connection. Dad and I haven't spoken since the wedding. He tried to reach out a few times, sent emails about how I'd humiliated them, how what I did was cruel and vindictive, how I needed to apologize, like I owed them an apology for exposing the truth about their relationship. I never responded. What would I even say? Sorry for showing everyone who you really are? Part of me feels bad about ruining their wedding. Part of me knows that was nuclear and dramatic, and probably not the healthiest way to handle the situation. But the larger part of me thinks they deserved it. They made choices knowing how much it would hurt me. They built a relationship on betrayal and expected everyone to celebrate it. They wanted the fairy tale without acknowledging the damage they'd caused. The last I heard, Melissa tried to reach out through a mutual friend, said she wanted to apologize, wanted to explain. I didn't respond to that either. Some betrayals don't deserve explanations or second chances. Some people show you exactly who they are, and you're better off believing them. While we're on the topic of weddings gone wrong, let me tell you about the time I somehow became the villain just for existing in the same room as my fiancé's brother. My fiancé Tom's brother Ryan had always been the golden child in their family. The kind of guy who seemed to do everything right from birth, you know. Star athlete in high school, full ride to a prestigious university, landed some high-paying corporate job right out of college, married his high school sweetheart in this picture-perfect ceremony that their mum still had framed photos of all over the house. He was the standard everyone else in the family got measured against, and from what Tom told me, he'd spent his entire childhood hearing about how Ryan did this or Ryan achieved that. When Tom and I got engaged after dating for 2 years, his family seemed genuinely happy for us. His mum cried, his dad shook Tom's hand like he was proud, and Ryan gave this toast at our engagement party about how Tom had finally found someone who could put up with him. It was sweet, normal, everything you'd want from your future in-laws. The engagement party was at Tom's parents' house, their backyard decorated with string lights and flowers, about 50 people milling around drinking and congratulating us. Ryan had been drinking steadily throughout the night. Not sloppy drunk, but that loose kind of drunk where people's filters start disappearing. I didn't think much of it. It was a party. People drink at parties. I'd gone into the garage to grab more ice from the backup freezer when I heard the door close behind me. Turned around and Ryan was standing there, blocking the exit, swaying slightly. "You know," he said, words just a little slurred, "I've always wondered what you were like." The comment hung in the air, inappropriate and loaded. I laughed nervously, tried to move past him toward the door. He shifted, still blocking my path. "Tom doesn't deserve you. He's always been the screw-up, the one who couldn't get anything right." My heart started pounding. We were alone in the garage, music and conversation happening 50 feet away in the backyard. But nobody could see us. Nobody knew I was trapped in here with my drunk, future brother-in-law, who was suddenly looking at me like I was something he wanted to take. "Ryan, you're drunk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's get you some water and back to the party." He moved closer, put his hand on the wall next to my head, leaning in. Just one kiss. Just to see what he's getting that I'm not. Then he actually tried to kiss me, lunged forward with his eyes closed, like this was some romantic moment and not assault. Pure instinct took over. I kneed him in the stomach as hard as I could. He doubled over, gasping, and I shoved past him, ran back to the party, found Tom talking to his cousins by the grill. I pulled him aside, hands shaking, told him what just happened. Tom's face went from confused to furious in about 2 seconds. He marched into that garage, me following behind him, and confronted Ryan, who was still bent over trying to catch his breath. "What did you do?" Tom demanded. Ryan straightened up, and I watched his expression shift from pained to calculating in real time. "Your fiancée came on to me," Ryan said, voice suddenly clearer, more sober. "She's been flirting with me all night, following me around, making comments. I came in here to get away from her, and she cornered me, tried to kiss me. I pushed her off, and she must have gotten mad." The lie came out so smooth, so practiced, like he'd constructed it in the 30 seconds between me leaving and us coming back. Tom looked at me, looked at his brother, and without hesitation said, "You're lying." But Ryan's wife had followed us into the garage, had heard Ryan's version. She looked at me with this expression of disgust and betrayal, like I'd personally stabbed her. "I knew there was something off about her," she said to Tom. "The way she dresses, the way she acts around men. Of course she'd try something with Ryan." Things escalated fast. Ryan's wife went to Tom's parents, crying, told them what Ryan had said. Tom's mom came and found me, asked if we could talk privately. We went into the house, into the kitchen, and she looked at me with this disappointed expression and said, "I think it would be best if you and Tom postponed the wedding, just until we can sort out what really happened tonight." I stood there completely stunned. "What really happened is that Ryan tried to kiss me, and I defended myself," I said. She shook her head sadly, like I was a child lying about breaking a vase. "Ryan would never do something like that. He's married, he loves his wife, he's always been faithful, always been respectful, but you're young, and sometimes young women get confused about attention and affection." Tom's dad joined the conversation, backed up his wife, said that Ryan had never given them a reason to doubt him, that maybe I'd misread the situation, that maybe I'd had too much to drink and things got confused. They suggested Tom call off the wedding, actually stood there at our engagement party, and suggested their son not marry me because I was apparently some kind of seductress who threw myself at married men. Tom listened to all of it, then said, "We're leaving, and if you can't believe her over Ryan, then I guess you've made your choice about who matters more." We left our own engagement party, got in the car and drove to my parents' house where I cried for about 3 hours while Tom held me and his phone blew up with messages from his family demanding he see reason. The next few months were brutal. Tom's family froze us out completely. Didn't return calls, didn't respond to messages. Ryan's wife posted vague things on social media about betrayal and fake friends. Tom's mum called my mum, tried to convince her that I was troubled, that maybe I needed therapy, that this was a pattern of behavior I'd exhibited before. My mum, bless her, told Tom's mom exactly where she could put her opinions and hung up. We decided to elope, just us, my parents, and a judge at the courthouse. Wore a simple white dress I bought off the rack, had dinner at my parents' favorite restaurant after. It wasn't the wedding I'd imagined, but it was honest and it was ours and nobody there thought I was a liar. Tom struggled with losing his family, would have moments where he'd stare at his phone, clearly wanting to reach out, clearly hoping they'd come around. I told him I'd understand if he wanted to reconcile with them, that I didn't want to be the reason he lost his family. He said I wasn't the reason, that their choice to believe Ryan over basic logic was the reason. A year went by. We built a life together, just the two of us and my family. Got a dog, bought a little house, started talking about having kids someday. Tom's family remained radio silent. Then, one random Tuesday night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Ryan's wife. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. Then the words started coming through. She'd found texts on Ryan's phone. Messages with 3 different women, graphic and explicit, dating back years. Some from before they were even married. Some from the week of our engagement party. He'd been cheating on her their entire relationship, apparently. And she'd finally found proof. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I should have believed you. I should have known he was lying. He's been lying to me for years, and I was so stupid. I defended him. I helped his family attack you, and you were telling the truth the whole time." She kept apologizing, kept crying, said she was filing for divorce, said she'd told Tom's parents everything, that they knew now Ryan had lied. I thanked her for calling, told her I appreciated the apology, and hung up. Waited for Tom's parents to reach out, waited for some acknowledgement that they'd been wrong, that they'd chosen the wrong son to believe, that they owed us an apology. Days went by, then weeks, nothing. Radio silence. 6 months later, I got pregnant. We were thrilled, started planning for this whole new chapter. I thought maybe the news of a grandchild would be enough to break the stalemate, that Tom's parents would want to be involved. Tom called them, told them they were going to be grandparents. His mum said congratulations in this flat voice and hung up. No follow-up call, no request to be involved, just polite acknowledgement and nothing else. Our daughter was born last month. She's perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, her dad's eyes and my nose. My parents are obsessed with her, come over constantly, have already spoiled her with more stuffed animals than any infant needs. Tom's parents haven't met her, haven't asked to meet her. Send a card with a check in it and nothing else. The thing is, I don't even feel angry anymore. Just sad for Tom. Sad for our daughter who'll grow up without half her grandparents because they couldn't admit they were wrong. Sad that Ryan's lie was more believable than my truth, just because he'd spent a lifetime being the golden child. Ryan and his wife are divorced now. He moved to a different city, apparently. Started over somewhere his reputation wasn't completely destroyed. Tom's parents still talk to him, from what I understand. Still have a relationship with the son who lied and cheated and assaulted his brother's fiancée. But not with the son who stood by the woman he loved when everyone told him not to. We didn't invite them to meet their grandchild. Didn't see the point in forcing a relationship with people who fundamentally didn't respect us. Maybe someday they'll apologize. Maybe someday they'll want to be part of our lives. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not losing sleep over it either. We've built something good without them. Our daughter will grow up knowing she's loved by the people who matter, and that's enough. Speaking of people who refuse to apologize, my husband's ex was about to take revenge to a whole new corporate level. I'd been working at this boutique marketing firm for 2 years when the company announced they were bringing in a new VP of client relations to help us expand into the tech sector. Everyone was buzzing about it, excited for fresh leadership, new opportunities, all that corporate optimism. They sent around an email with her bio and headshot. Jessica Chen, impressive resume, had worked at some major firms in San Francisco, MBA from a top school. I glanced at it, thought nothing of it. Forwarded it to my husband Dan with a "new boss seems cool" message. He called me immediately. His voice had this weird, tight quality to it. "Send me that email again," he said. I did. Silence on the other end of the line for a solid 10 seconds. "That's my ex, from college. The one I told you about. The one who'd cheated on him with his roommate, then spent the next 3 years trying to win him back, showing up at his apartment, sending letters, calling his parents, the full obsessive ex treatment. The one he'd had to basically flee to a different city to escape." My stomach dropped. Of all the marketing firms in all the cities, she was going to be my direct supervisor. Dan was panicking, asking if I could request a transfer to a different department, maybe find a new job entirely. I told him I'd worked too hard to get where I was, that I wasn't going to let his college ex run me out of a career I loved. Besides, it had been almost a decade. Surely she'd moved on, become a professional adult, Wouldn't even care that I was married to her ex. I was so wrong. Jessica's first week, she called me into her office for a one-on-one. Standard new boss meeting, getting to know the team kind of thing. I walked in and she was sitting behind this massive desk, perfectly styled hair, designer suit, looking every bit the successful executive. She smiled at me, gestured for me to sit, and said, "So you're married to Dan? Small world." Not a question, a statement. She'd clearly looked me up, knew exactly who I was before I'd even walked in. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep it professional, neutral. "We've been married for 3 years." She nodded slowly, that smile never quite reaching her eyes. "He's a great guy. We had some really good times together back in the day. I'm sure he's told you all about me." The emphasis on all felt deliberate, loaded. I mumbled something non-committal, steered the conversation back to work, got out of there as quickly as possible. The sabotage started small. She'd schedule mandatory late meetings, always on Fridays, always running until 8 or 9 at night. Then she'd text Dan. I didn't know about the texts at first, not until Dan showed me his phone one night, frustrated. Messages from Jessica saying things like, "Working late with your wife again, she's so dedicated," with a winky face emoji. "Your wife and Marcus make such a great team, they work so well together." Marcus was our attractive male coworker. Definitely not someone I was working closely with beyond normal colleague interaction. She was planting seeds, trying to make Dan suspicious, trying to create doubt where there wasn't any. I started documenting everything, screenshots of meeting schedules, email chains showing what projects I was actually working on, keeping detailed notes of every interaction with Jessica. Something told me I was going to need proof of what was happening. Then she started altering my work. I'd submit a report, she'd change key figures before sending it to the client, then act shocked in meetings when the numbers didn't match what the client expected. Made me look incompetent, like I couldn't do basic math. She'd volunteer me for projects I'd never agreed to, then express disappointment when I couldn't deliver on timelines I'd never been told about. Classic professional sabotage, all done with plausible deniability. At company events, she'd corner Dan if he showed up, bring up memories from college, inside jokes, reminisce about places they'd been together. All very innocent on the surface, just old friends catching up. But the subtext was clear. She was trying to remind him of what they'd had, trying to wedge herself between us. I kept my head down, kept doing good work, kept documenting everything. Collected emails where she'd ask me to do something one way, then criticize me for not doing it differently. Saved messages where she'd changed deadlines without notice. Built a file of evidence that showed a clear pattern of targeted harassment. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. 6 months into Jessica's tenure, she called me into her office. Said there'd been a serious mistake on the Henderson account, a major client, something that could cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. And according to her records, I was responsible. She had an email, supposedly from me, approving a campaign strategy that was completely wrong for the client's needs. I looked at that email and immediately knew I'd never written it. The writing style was off, the signature line was formatted differently than I formatted mine, the timestamp was from a day I'd been out sick with the flu. I told Jessica this. She gave me this sad, disappointed look and said she had no choice but to recommend my termination to HR. That's when I went nuclear. Marched straight to HR with 6 months of documented evidence. Showed them the pattern of late meetings, the altered reports, the changed deadlines, the suspicious email that supposedly lost the Henderson account. Requested they do a forensic analysis of that email because I was certain it hadn't come from my computer. HR took it seriously, started an investigation. And here's where it gets absurd. Once they started really looking into Jessica, once they started digging into her background, things started unraveling fast. Turned out she'd fabricated parts of her resume. That MBA from a top school. She'd attended for 1 semester before dropping out, but listed it as completed. References she'd provided had never actually worked with her, were friends doing her favors. Projects she claimed to have led at previous companies, she'd been a minor contributor at best. The email about the Henderson account, sent from her computer, from her login, but made to look like it came from me. Sloppy work, really. It pulled the logs and it was right there, clear as day. She'd tried to frame me for her own mistake, probably hoping to get me fired and out of Dan's life for good. HR called her in on a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't in the meeting, but I heard about it from people who were in the office. Raised voices, Jessica crying, then security escorting her out with a box of her personal belongings. Fired immediately, terminated for cause, no severance, no good reference. Just gone. The vindication was sweet. I won't pretend it wasn't. My co-workers who'd witnessed Jessica's treatment of me suddenly came forward with their own stories, their own observations of her behavior. Turned out I wasn't the only one she'd been awful to, just the one she'd targeted most aggressively. The company sent around a vague email about leadership changes and bringing in a new VP, never mentioned Jessica's name again. Dan and I celebrated that night, ordered takeout, opened a bottle of wine, laughed at the sheer audacity of someone trying to destroy my career just to get back at their ex from a decade ago. The pettiness of it was almost impressive. She'd gotten herself a position of power in my company, fabricated credentials to do it, then used that power to try to ruin my marriage and my job. And it had all backfired spectacularly. A few weeks later, we heard through mutual friends that Jessica had moved back to her hometown. Couldn't find work in our city after word got around about why she'd been fired, about the fabricated resume and the harassment investigation. Had to start over somewhere nobody knew her story. Is it petty that we felt satisfied by that? Probably. Do I feel bad about it? Not even a little bit. She came into my workplace with the specific intention of destroying my life because she couldn't handle that her ex had moved on and found happiness. She made her choices, fabricated credentials, harassed an employee, tried to frame me for her mistakes. The consequences were entirely of her own making. My new boss is great, by the way. Actually supportive, actually interested in helping the team succeed, rather than using her position to wage personal vendettas. I got promoted 6 months after Jessica left, partly because once she was gone, my actual work could speak for itself without someone actively sabotaging it. Dan still gets weird about it sometimes. Feels guilty that his ex from college somehow found her way into my professional life and tried to blow it up. I remind him that Jessica's obsession with him isn't his fault, that her choices to lie and manipulate and harass were entirely on her. He's working on believing that. The whole experience taught me that documenting everything is crucial. If I hadn't kept those emails, those screenshots, those detailed notes about every interaction, Jessica might have succeeded in getting me fired. My word against hers, and she was the VP. But evidence doesn't lie, patterns don't lie, and eventually people who build their lives on deception get caught. Jessica's lies caught up with her eventually, but nothing compared to the web of deception my stepmom tried to spin about a pregnancy that never existed. My dad married Vanessa 3 years after my mum passed away from cancer. I was 19, away at college, trying to process the fact that he was moving on with someone who was only 13 years older than me. Vanessa was 32, one of those women who dressed young, talked young, seemed desperate to prove she wasn't aging. She'd met my dad at his gym, apparently bonded over spin class and protein shakes. When he told me they were getting married after 6 months of dating, I tried to be supportive. He deserved to be happy. He'd been through hell watching my mum deteriorate. If Vanessa made him smile again, who was I to judge? But Vanessa had this obsession with getting pregnant immediately. It was all she talked about at family dinners, at holidays, every phone call with my dad. She wanted a baby, wanted to give him a son, wanted to create their perfect little family. My dad seemed into it at first, talking about baby names, looking at cribs online, but after a few months with no results, Vanessa started getting weird about it. Secretive doctor appointments she wouldn't let him attend, online forums about fertility she'd browse for hours, sudden mood swings when anyone mentioned pregnancy. Then, 6 months into their marriage, she made the big announcement. She was pregnant. Dad called me crying happy tears, said he'd never thought he'd get to be a father again, that this was a miracle. Vanessa posted ultrasound photos on social media, started a registry, announced the gender at a party with one of those exploding confetti cannons. A boy. They were having a boy. Dad was over the moon. I tried to be happy for them. I really did. But something felt off from the beginning. Vanessa refused to let my dad come to any of her OB appointments, said her doctor was very private, very exclusive, didn't allow partners in the exam room, which seemed strange, but what did I know about fancy Beverly Hills obstetricians? She claimed she was going to appointments, would leave the house with a purse and come back with pamphlets about pregnancy. but she never had any real details to share. No measurements, no due date changes, nothing concrete. Her belly grew, which should have been reassuring, but I couldn't shake this feeling that something was wrong. She wore the same free maternity dresses on rotation, never seemed to have the typical pregnancy complaints my friends talked about. No morning sickness, no swollen ankles, no food aversions. When I asked her about it, she'd say she was one of the lucky ones, that she was having the easiest pregnancy imaginable. My dad ate it up, doted on her, rubbed her feet every night, talked to her belly. Then at 7 months, she announced she was going into early labor. Dad rushed her to the hospital, called me frantic, said the baby was coming too soon. I drove home from college, got to the hospital to find my dad in the waiting room. Vanessa had insisted he couldn't be in the delivery room, said she was too stressed, that the doctors thought it would be better for the baby if she could focus. Dad was beside himself with worry, pacing the hallway, checking his phone every 30 seconds. 4 hours later, a nurse came out and said Vanessa had delivered a healthy baby boy. Dad could come meet his son. I followed him into the recovery room, and there was Vanessa, looking remarkably put together for someone who'd supposedly just given birth, holding a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket. Dad started crying immediately, reached for the baby, and Vanessa handed him over carefully. I watched my dad hold this infant, watched him count the tiny fingers and toes, watched him fall completely in love in real time. Then I asked if I could hold my new brother. Vanessa's face changed just for a second. Something protective and panicked flashed across her expression before she smoothed it back into a smile. "Maybe later," she said. "He's still adjusting. I don't want to pass him around too much." Dad agreed immediately, so protective of his new son already. They came home 2 days later. Vanessa was weirdly possessive of the baby, wouldn't let anyone hold him for more than a few minutes. Always had an excuse for why he needed to go back to her. The baby cried a lot, which she said was normal, was colic, was just adjustment. But something in my gut kept screaming that this was wrong. That night, while everyone was asleep, I went into the nursery. The baby was in his crib, sleeping peacefully, pacifier in his mouth. I stood there for a long time, looking at this tiny human who was supposed to be my brother. Then I carefully removed the pacifier, put it in a plastic bag, replaced it with a clean one from the package, sent that pacifier to one of those DNA testing services that advertise on podcasts, paid extra for rush processing. 2 weeks of waiting felt like years. I went back to college, tried to focus on classes, checked my email obsessively. When the results came back, I read them 3 times to make sure I understood. No genetic relation to my father. No genetic relation to Vanessa. This baby wasn't theirs. This baby wasn't related to any of us. I drove home without calling first, brought the DNA results printed out, brought my laptop with the digital copy, called the police on the way, explained the situation, asked them to meet me at my dad's house. 2 officers showed up about 10 minutes after I did. The confrontation was brutal. I showed my dad the DNA results, watched his face go from confused to horrified to broken. Vanessa tried to deny it at first, said the test must be wrong, that those services aren't reliable. Then she tried to say I must have tested the wrong baby somehow, that I'd made a mistake. The police asked her direct questions. Where did she give birth? What hospital? Can you provide medical records? And suddenly the whole plan fell apart. She started crying, then confessing, words tumbling out in this desperate stream. She'd faked the entire pregnancy, bought a fake belly online, wore it under her clothes, studied pregnancy symptoms so she'd know what to say, found a desperate teenage mother through some online forum, offered her money for the baby. $20,000 for a newborn no one would question because Vanessa had spent months establishing this elaborate lie. The level of premeditation was actually terrifying. She planned this for months, created fake doctor's appointments, staged the hospital visit, convinced my dad she'd given birth, all because she was so desperate to keep him, so convinced that giving him a son would secure their marriage. Police arrested her that night, charged with child trafficking, fraud, a bunch of other charges I don't fully understand. They took the baby into protective custody, which destroyed my dad all over again. He'd bonded with this infant, loved him as his son, and now that child was being taken away through no fault of his own. The teen mother didn't want the baby back. She'd been in a terrible situation, had thought giving him to Vanessa would mean a better life for him than she could provide. She signed over her parental rights, said she couldn't take care of him. The courts got involved, social services, lawyers. It was a mess. My dad fought for custody, argued that even though the baby wasn't biologically his, he'd bonded with him, loved him, wanted to raise him. It took 6 months and more legal fees than I want to think about, but eventually the courts agreed. Granted my dad full custody of this baby who'd come into our lives through lies and fraud, but who was innocent in all of it. We named him officially. Dad had been calling him James, and it stuck. James legally became my dad's son through adoption. Vanessa's in prison, serving 8 years for what she did. She sends letters sometimes that my dad throws away without reading. James is 4 now, smart, funny, obsessed with dinosaurs and construction trucks. He calls my dad Daddy and me Sissy, and has no idea about the circumstances of how he joined our family. We'll tell him someday, when he's old enough to understand. For now, he's just a kid who's loved, who's safe, who has a family that chose him even though we didn't know we were choosing him. The whole thing is bizarre when I think about it too hard. Vanessa's desperation, the fake pregnancy, buying a baby like it was a transaction instead of a human life. But James is here, and he's ours, and sometimes the most broken beginnings lead to something worth keeping. My dad's still processing it all. Therapy twice a week, working through the betrayal and the trauma and the guilt of not seeing the signs sooner. But he's a good father to James, present and loving, and determined to give him the childhood he deserves. At least Vanessa's lies had an expiration date, but my boyfriend's mum spent years perfecting her hatred before I finally made her internet famous. Dating Alex for the first 2 years felt like living in 2 different realities. When it was just us, everything was perfect. He was thoughtful, funny, supportive of my career, genuinely interested in building a life together. But the moment his mother Patricia entered the picture, I had to become a different version of myself. The version that smiled through thinly veiled insults and pretended not to notice the constant judgment radiating off her like heat from asphalt in July. Patricia was one of those women who'd perfected the art of the backhanded compliment. She'd look at my outfit and say things like, "That dress is so brave. I could never pull off something that bold," with this smile that didn't reach her eyes. Or, "Alex usually dates more traditional girls, but I suppose times are changing," when I'd mention my job in tech. Every comment was carefully calibrated to sound almost nice if you weren't paying attention, but the subtext was always clear. I wasn't good enough for her son. I played nice because I loved Alex and he loved his mother. And I wasn't about to be the girlfriend who caused family drama. I showed up to her dinner parties, brought expensive wine, complimented her cooking, asked about her garden. I smiled through her stories about Alex's ex-girlfriend who was such a lovely girl and came from such a good family. I nodded along when she'd reminisce about women Alex had dated in college who were so accomplished and had such refined taste. Alex noticed some of it, would apologize after family gatherings, say his mum just needed time to warm up to me. He couldn't see the full scope of her disdain because Patricia was smart enough to save her worst comments for moments when he wasn't in the room. A whispered remark when we were alone in the kitchen, a pointed look across the dinner table, little moments of cruelty that were easy to deny if confronted. Then Alex proposed, took me to the beach where we'd had our first date, got down on one knee with his grandmother's ring, asked me to marry him. I said yes immediately, crying happy tears, calling my parents, posting photos on social media. We went to his parents' house the next day to share the news in person. Patricia's reaction was perfect, too perfect in retrospect. She hugged me, tears in her eyes, said, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart," in this warm voice I'd never heard her use with me before. She insisted on opening champagne, toasted to our future, asked to see the ring a dozen times. Alex looked so relieved, so happy that his mother was finally accepting me. I wanted to believe it was real. 3 days later, I got added to a group chat. Alex's sister Michelle had created it. Something about coordinating a surprise party for their dad's birthday. Standard family logistics stuff. I was actually touched to be included. Felt like maybe Patricia's acceptance had been genuine. Then I scrolled up. The chat had existed for years, and Michelle had apparently just renamed it and added me without thinking to remove the chat history first. Years of messages sat there, waiting for me to discover them. Messages from Patricia to Alex's siblings, to his aunts and uncles, to extended family members I'd met at various gatherings. The first one I saw was from 8 months ago. Alex brought that girl to dinner again. So trashy. The way she laughs, the way she dresses. I don't know what he sees in her. My stomach dropped, but I kept scrolling, some horrible compulsion making me read more. She's obviously using him for money. Girls like that always are. I miss when Alex dated Sarah. Now there was a girl with class. Then I got to the racist comments. I'm half Filipino, and Patricia had apparently spent 2 years making remarks about my background that she'd never said to my face. Comments about my family, my culture, stereotypes she threw around casually like they were observations instead of slurs. Hundreds of messages spread across years, a complete catalogue of her hatred. I sat on my bathroom floor reading through all of it, screenshots piling up on my phone. Part of me wanted to pretend I'd never seen it, to delete the evidence and go back to playing nice. But a larger part of me, the part that had smiled through 2 years of subtle cruelty, was done being polite. I created a burner TikTok account, didn't use my real name, didn't show my face. Just posted the screenshots, dozens of them, Patricia's full name visible in the group chat header, added text overlay explaining the context. My future mother-in-law's real feelings about me, shared in the family group chat she didn't know I could see. I included the name of the country club she frequented, the one she'd mentioned approximately 8,000 times in conversations, the place where she played tennis and had lunch with her book club and basically built her entire social identity. Tagged the location. Hit post. Then came the breaking point. The video went viral in a way I never expected. Not just a few thousand views, but hundreds of thousands, then millions. People were outraged, were sharing it to their own platforms, were commenting about their own terrible in-laws. The algorithm picked it up, and suddenly Patricia's words were being seen by people across the country. Her friends saw it. Her book club saw it. Members of her precious country club saw it. My phone started blowing up with messages from people who knew Patricia, people who'd thought she was this sweet society woman and were now seeing the ugliness she'd hidden behind closed doors. The country club's social media got flooded with comments, people demanding they take action against a member who'd posted such hateful things. Alex saw it when a coworker sent it to him, asking if this was his mum. He came home early from work, found me on the couch still scrolling through comments. "Is this real?" he asked, and I just handed him my phone, with the original group chat still open. Watched him read through his mother's messages. Watched his face go from confused to horrified to furious. He called Patricia immediately, put her on speaker. She tried to deny it at first, said someone must have faked the screenshots, that this was all a misunderstanding. He started reading her own words back to her verbatim, messages from specific dates, things only she would have written. The denial crumbled into excuses. She was just venting. She didn't mean any of it. She was protective of her son. I had to understand. "You called her trashy," Alex said, voice shaking. "You made racist comments about her family. For 2 years you smiled to her face and said horrible things behind her back. There's nothing to understand except that you're not the person I thought you were." The country club asked her to resign. Apparently having a viral video of your bigotry attached to their name wasn't the kind of publicity they wanted. Her book club stopped inviting her to meetings. Friends who'd known her for decades were calling to say they were disappointed, disgusted, done with her. Patricia tried to apologize, sent me a long email about how she'd been wrong, how she'd let her fears about losing her son cloud her judgment, how she wanted to make things right. But the apology rang hollow. She wasn't sorry for what she'd said or thought. She was sorry she'd been caught, sorry her words had consequences. Alex uninvited her from our wedding, told her she could attend the ceremony if she wanted, sit in the back like any other guest, but she wouldn't be in family photos, wouldn't be announced as mother of the groom, wouldn't have any special role in our day. She didn't take it well, threatened to boycott entirely, said Alex would regret choosing me over his own mother. He chose me anyway. The TikTok currently has 14 million views. I still get comments from people sharing their own stories, thanking me for exposing the kind of behavior that usually stays hidden in family group chats. Patricia's learned that words have consequences, that you can't spend years spewing hatred and expect it to never come to light. Alex and I are getting married next month. His dad is walking me down the aisle alongside my own father. His siblings are in the wedding party. Patricia will be notably absent, and honestly, the day will be better for it. Some people think what I did was too harsh, that I should have confronted her privately instead of making it public. But I spent 2 years being the bigger person, swallowing insults, pretending not to notice her contempt. She had every opportunity to treat me with basic human decency and chose cruelty instead. The public exposure wasn't revenge, it was just finally letting everyone else see what I'd been dealing with all along. Some people steal hearts, some steal dignity, but my sister literally stole the diamond off my finger and thought she'd get away with it. My fiancé proposed with his grandmother's vintage engagement ring, this absolutely stunning Art Deco piece from the 1920s, with a center diamond surrounded by sapphires in this intricate platinum setting. The ring had been appraised at around $40,000. Not that the monetary value was what mattered to me. What mattered was the history, the fact that his grandmother had worn it for 60 years of marriage, that it represented this legacy of love and commitment. When he slipped it on my finger and told me the story of his grandparents, I cried. It was perfect. My sister Brittany had always had this thing about comparing our lives. We're only 2 years apart, grew up in the same house with the same opportunities, but somehow she'd convinced herself that I'd gotten all the luck and she'd gotten none of it. Better boyfriend, better job, better apartment, happier life. Those were literally her words at family dinners, said with this bitter laugh like she was joking but absolutely wasn't. When I got promoted at work, she'd make comments about how some people just fall into success. When I started dating Chris, she'd mention how she never met nice guys like that. It was exhausting, but I tried to be sympathetic, tried to support her, tried not to rub my happiness in her face. The engagement announcement sent her into overdrive. At the engagement party my parents threw, she kept asking to try on the ring, wanting to see how it looked on her hand, making jokes about how it was wasted on me since I wasn't really a jewelry person anyway. I laughed it off, took photos with her where she held my hand up to show off the ring, didn't think much of the weird energy she was giving off. She was my sister. I wanted her to be happy for me. 2 days after the party, I went to put the ring back in my jewelry box after showering. I'd taken it off because I was paranoid about losing stones down the drain, had placed it in the box on my dresser like I always did, except it wasn't there. I checked the bathroom counter, thinking maybe I'd forgotten and left it there. Nothing. Checked my purse, my coat pockets, retraced every step I'd taken that day. The ring was gone. I tore my apartment apart, moved furniture, checked under couch cushions, went through the vacuum bag in case I'd somehow knocked it off the dresser and it got sucked up. Called Chris panicking, saying I'd lost his grandmother's ring, that I was the worst fiancé in the world. He drove over immediately, helped me search, tried to calm me down. We filed a police report, called the insurance company, retraced everywhere I'd been in the past 48 hours. 3 days of absolute agony. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, felt physically sick every time I thought about losing something so irreplaceable. Then I was scrolling Instagram, mindlessly looking at stories to distract myself from the anxiety, and I saw it. Brittany's post, a photo of her hand, my ring on her finger, caption reading, "He finally did it. I'm engaged. I can't believe Jake surprised me like this. I'm the luckiest girl alive." The comments were flooded with congratulations from friends and family. People saying the ring was gorgeous, asking when the wedding was. I stared at that photo for a solid minute, brain trying to process what I was seeing. That was my ring. Not a similar ring, not a ring that looked kind of like mine. My ring, with the specific sapphire arrangement, the unique engraving inside the band that you couldn't see in photos but I knew was there. My sister had stolen my engagement ring and was pretending her boyfriend had proposed with it. I called her immediately, hands shaking. She answered all bright and cheerful, asking if I'd seen her news, wasn't it exciting? "Brittany, that's my ring," I said. Silence on the other end for about 5 seconds. Then she laughed, this forced casual sound. "What are you talking about? Jake proposed with this ring. It just looks similar to yours, I guess. Vintage rings all kind of have the same style." The gaslighting was almost impressive in its boldness. "Where's my ring then?" I asked. "Because it disappeared from my apartment right after you were here for the engagement party, and now you're wearing what looks exactly like it." She got defensive, said I was being paranoid and jealous that she was engaged too, that I couldn't stand not being the center of attention, said her ring was from a jeweler downtown and I was imagining things because I felt guilty about losing mine. I hung up and sat there processing the absolute audacity. My sister had stolen my ring, was wearing it publicly on social media, and was now trying to convince me I was crazy for noticing. The rational part of my brain said to handle this quietly, call my parents, deal with it as a family. But the part of me that had spent years watching Brittany tear me down while playing the victim was done being rational. I pulled up every document related to the ring. The insurance appraisal Chris had gotten when his grandmother passed, and the ring came to him. The photos from the jeweler showing the unique inscription inside the band, his grandparents' initials and wedding date engraved in script so small you needed magnification to read it. The receipt from when he'd had it resized for my finger. Every piece of documentation that proved this specific ring belonged to Chris's family and had been given to me. Then I made an Instagram post, posted the insurance documents with the serial numbers visible, posted the appraisal showing the unique characteristics, posted the photos of the inscription, wrote a caption explaining that my engagement ring had been stolen from my apartment and was now being worn by someone claiming it was theirs, and that I had documentation proving ownership. Tagged Brittany, tagged her boyfriend Jake, tagged my parents, Chris's parents, extended family members, mutual friends, made the post public so everyone could see it. And here's where it gets absurd. Within an hour, Brittany's engagement post was deleted. Her Instagram went private. My phone started blowing up with messages from family members asking what was happening, whether this was some kind of misunderstanding. Jake called me directly, voice shaking, asking if what I'd posted was true. I told him yes, that was my ring, stolen from my apartment after a family gathering. Jake had never proposed. Brittany had come home with the ring, told him she'd bought it for herself as a treat, that she'd always wanted a vintage piece. Then she'd posted the engagement announcement without telling him, apparently hoping he'd just go along with it once it was public, that the social pressure would push him into actually proposing. The delusion was breathtaking. Things went from bad to unhinged when my mum called. She'd gone over to Brittany's place, demanded to see the ring. Brittany had tried to insist it was hers, that I was lying, that the documents were fake. My mom asked to see the inside of the band. The inscription was right there, Chris's grandparents' initials, proof that this was the family heirloom and not some ring Brittany's boyfriend had bought. Mom made her return it that night, drove her to my apartment, stood there while Brittany handed over the ring without making eye contact, mumbled something that might have been an apology, but sounded more like she was sorry she got caught. Mum also made her post a public apology on Instagram, admitting she'd taken the ring and lied about the engagement. Brittany did it, the most bare minimum apology possible, then deleted her entire account the next day. Jake broke up with her immediately. Apparently, the fake engagement announcement was the final straw in a relationship that had already been rocky, already full of Brittany's manipulations and lies. He told mutual friends that he'd been planning to propose eventually, but her stunt made him realize he couldn't trust her, couldn't build a life with someone who'd steal from family and fabricate major life events for social media attention. My parents were horrified, kept apologizing to me and Chris, saying they didn't know Brittany was capable of something like this. I think they'd always known she had issues with jealousy, but stealing a family heirloom and pretending to be engaged crossed a line they couldn't rationalize away. Brittany didn't come to our wedding, didn't RSVP, didn't send a gift, didn't acknowledge it at all. My parents said she was too embarrassed, too ashamed to face everyone after what she'd done. Part of me felt bad for her, felt sad that our relationship had deteriorated to the point where she'd rather steal from me than be happy for me. But the larger part of me was just done making excuses for her behavior, done trying to maintain a relationship with someone who saw my happiness as something to take rather than celebrate. She's still single last I checked, still living alone, still working the same job she complains about, still posting vague, bitter things on whatever new social media account she's created. Definitely not wearing any engagement rings, real or stolen. The ring is back where it belongs, on my finger, where I wear it every day as a reminder that some people will try to take what's yours and call you crazy for noticing. But documentation doesn't lie. And sometimes the best revenge is just showing everyone the receipt. While Brittany was stealing jewelry, my cousin's husband was sending me flowers, and somehow I became the villain in that story too. My cousin Rachel got married to Brett in one of those weddings that felt more like a status announcement than a celebration of love. Everything was designer, everything was expensive, everything was carefully curated for maximum Instagram impact. Rachel made sure everyone knew she'd landed a doctor, that she'd won some invisible competition the rest of us didn't know we were in. I was genuinely happy for her, showed up to the bachelorette party, the bridal shower, the wedding itself, smiled in photos, gave a generous gift, kept my distance from the family drama that always seemed to swirl around Rachel. Brett seemed nice enough, polite, successful, clearly willing to fund Rachel's expensive tastes. We'd exchanged maybe 10 sentences total at various wedding events, the kind of surface-level small talk you make with your cousin's fiancé. Nothing memorable, nothing that would suggest any kind of connection beyond basic politeness. So when flowers showed up at my office 3 months after their wedding, I was confused. 24 red roses in this elaborate arrangement that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. My co-workers were immediately curious, asking if I had a secret admirer, teasing me about romantic gestures. I opened the card expecting maybe a thank you from a client or a birthday mix-up from my parents. The card read, "For the one who got away. B." Just those 7 words and an initial. I stared at it, trying to figure out who B could possibly be. I wasn't dating anyone, hadn't been on a date in months. Nobody in my life with that initial had any reason to send me flowers, romantic or otherwise. Then I noticed something else in the delivery box. A credit card receipt, probably left in by accident by whoever arranged the delivery. The name on the receipt was Brett Anderson, Rachel's husband, Brett. My stomach dropped. This had to be a mistake. Maybe he'd sent flowers to Rachel at her office, and they'd gotten delivered to the wrong address. Maybe the card was meant for her and the florist had mixed things up, but the card said "the one who got away," which didn't make sense for a married couple. And it was addressed specifically to me at my office, my full name and correct address. I called Rachel immediately. Didn't even think about it. Just pulled out my phone and dialed her number. She answered cheerful, asking what was up. "Did Brett send me flowers?" I asked. Silence on the other end. "What are you talking about?" she said, voice changing tone. I explained the delivery, read her the card, told her about the receipt. She went ballistic, started screaming about how I'd always been jealous of her, how I couldn't stand that she'd married well, and I was still single, how I must have flirted with Brett at the wedding, and now I was trying to break them up. I tried to interrupt, tried to explain that I'd never encouraged this, that I was as confused as she was. She wasn't hearing it. "You led him on," she kept saying. "You must have done something, said something, given him the impression you were interested. Brett wouldn't just do this out of nowhere." I forwarded her photos of the card and the receipt, proof that I hadn't solicited any of this. Told her she needed to talk to her husband about why he was sending romantic flowers to her cousin. But that wasn't even the worst part. Brett apparently convinced her that I'd been flirting with him at family events, that I'd given him my office address and asked him to send flowers, that this was all some scheme to seduce him away from her. The story was so ridiculous I almost laughed, except Rachel believed it, or wanted to believe it, because believing her husband was the creep was harder than believing I was the homewrecker. She called my mum, her mum, basically everyone in the family, spun this narrative where I'd been throwing myself at her husband since the wedding, where the flowers were my doing somehow. My mom called asking what was going on, why Rachel was so upset. I explained the situation, said I'd received unwanted flowers from Brett, and told Rachel immediately. You'd think that would be the end of it. You'd think my own mother would believe me over some story about me seducing my cousin's husband. But the family took Rachel's side. They said I was causing drama, that even if Brett had sent the flowers, I must have done something to encourage it, that maybe I should have just thrown them away and not told Rachel, saved everyone the trouble. I got uninvited from family dinners. My aunt told me I wasn't welcome at Rachel's birthday party coming up. Cousins who I'd been close with stopped responding to my texts. The whole family essentially froze me out, decided I was the problem because it was easier than admitting Brett was inappropriate, and Rachel was too insecure to see it. I stopped going to family events entirely, spent holidays with friends instead, built a chosen family that actually believed me when I said I hadn't done anything wrong. It hurt being cut off like that, but it also clarified who actually cared about me versus who just wanted to maintain family peace at any cost. 6 months went by. I heard through my mum, who still talked to me, but in this careful way like she was walking on eggshells, that Rachel and Brett were having problems. Apparently he was working late a lot, being distant, the usual signs. I didn't feel vindicated, just sad that Rachel had chosen to believe his lies over my truth and was now dealing with the consequences. Then came the breaking point. Brett got caught cheating with a nurse from his hospital. Not an emotional affair, not a one-time mistake, but a full-blown relationship he'd been carrying on for months. Someone saw them together at a restaurant in the next town over, told Rachel. She confronted him. He admitted everything. The perfect doctor husband Rachel had bragged about turned out to be exactly the kind of person who'd send inappropriate flowers to his wife's cousin and then lie about it. Rachel's marriage imploded. Brett moved out, they started divorce proceedings, the whole fairy tale came crashing down. And suddenly my phone lit up with a text from Rachel. Not a call, not a face-to-face conversation, just a text. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you about the flowers. You were right, I should have listened." That was it. No acknowledgement of the 6 months of family exclusion she'd caused. No apology for calling me names, accusing me of trying to seduce her husband, turning the whole family against me. Just a bare minimum text now that she'd learned the hard way that Brett was capable of exactly what I'd tried to warn her about. I left her on read. Didn't respond, didn't engage, just let that message sit there unanswered. Some apologies come too late to matter. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. The family tried to act like nothing had happened after Rachel's divorce, invited me to Christmas like the past 6 months of freezing me out had never occurred. I showed up for an hour, stayed polite and distant, left early. Made it clear I hadn't forgotten, even if they wanted to pretend they had. Rachel and I don't talk now. We exist in the same family ecosystem, but with this careful distance, like acquaintances forced to be in the same room occasionally. She's dating someone new, apparently learned nothing from the Brett situation, based on what I hear through family gossip. I've moved on, built a life that doesn't revolve around people who'd rather blame me than hold a man accountable for his actions. The flowers thing still bothers me sometimes. Not because of Brett, he was just a creep who got caught eventually, but because of how quickly everyone was willing to believe I'd done something wrong, how little it took for them to cut me out. That showed me something about family loyalty that I can't unsee. My family blamed me for flowers I didn't ask for, but they had nothing on what my mom did when she hid the biggest opportunity of my life. I applied to Stanford Early Decision in October of my senior year. It was my dream school, had been since I was 14, and went to a summer program there. Walked around campus imagining myself as a student, sat in on lectures about literature and sociology, and felt like I'd found my people. I'd worked for this, 4.0 GPA, captain of the debate team, volunteer work at the local library, essays I'd rewritten 20 times until they were perfect. When I hit submit on that application, I felt like everything I'd done for 4 years was leading to this moment. Early decision notifications were supposed to come out in mid-December. I checked my email obsessively, refreshed the admissions portal every hour, barely slept. My mum kept telling me not to get my hopes up, that schools like Stanford were for other kinds of people with connections and money and legacies. I told her I had a real shot, that my counselor thought my application was strong. She'd just smile sadly and say she didn't want me to be disappointed. December came and went. No email, no letter, nothing. I called the admissions office and they said decisions had been mailed, that I should have received something by now. I asked if they could tell me over the phone, and they said they couldn't, that all notifications went through official channels. I hung up devastated, convinced the letter had gotten lost in the mail, and I'd missed my chance. My mum found me crying in my room that night. She sat on my bed, rubbed my back, said she was sorry, but maybe this was for the best. That I could go to community college, transfer somewhere local after 2 years, stay close to home where I belonged. I felt like my entire future had just evaporated, like 4 years of work meant nothing. I applied to other schools, state universities, private colleges with decent aid packages, anywhere that would take me at this point. Got into a few, nothing special, nothing that made me feel the way Stanford had. Enrolled in community college for the fall, because at least it was affordable, at least it was something. Watched my friends get into their dream schools and leave town while I stayed behind. My mum seemed almost relieved, talked about how nice it would be to have me around for a few more years, how community college was a smart financial choice, how I could help her with things around the house. I felt like I was suffocating, but I didn't know what else to do. August rolled around, Mom was moving to a smaller apartment, downsizing now that I was technically an adult and she didn't need as much space. I was helping her pack, going through closets, boxing up old clothes and books. In the back of her bedroom closet, behind winter coats and storage bins, I found a box I didn't recognize. Just a plain cardboard box taped shut, my name written on it in her handwriting. I opened it. Inside were letters, multiple letters, all addressed to me, all unopened. College promotional materials, financial aid information, and right on top a thick envelope from Stanford University. My hand started shaking before I even opened it. The acceptance letter was dated December 15th, 9 months ago. Congratulations, we are pleased to offer you admission to the class of wherever. Full scholarship covering tuition, room, and board. Housing lottery information. Orientation details, everything I'd dreamed about, hidden in a box in my mother's closet. There were other letters too, from other schools I'd applied to, acceptances I'd never seen, financial aid packages I'd never known existed. She'd been stealing my mail for months, hiding every college response, making sure I believed I'd failed. I walked out of that closet holding the Stanford letter, feeling like reality was splitting in half. Found my mom in the kitchen packing dishes. "What is this?" I asked, voice shaking. She looked at the letter and her face went pale, then defensive. Started talking fast about how she'd done what was best for me, how Stanford would take me away from family, how I needed to stay close to home where people understood me. "You stole my mail," I said, still trying to process it. "You hid my college acceptances. You let me think I'd failed." She kept justifying it, saying I was too young to make such a big decision, that moving across the country would ruin me, that she was protecting me from making a mistake, like going to Stanford on a full scholarship was a mistake I needed protection from. I grabbed my phone, called Stanford admissions right there in her kitchen, explained through tears that I'd been accepted in December, that I'd never received the letter, that I wanted to know if there was any way to still attend. The admissions counselor was sympathetic, but said they'd assumed I'd declined when I didn't respond, that my spot had been given to someone on the wait list. I started crying harder, explained that my mother had hidden the acceptance, that I'd only just found it. There was a long pause. The counselor said she'd need to talk to her supervisor, asked if I could hold. I stood in that kitchen for 20 minutes on hold while my mom tried to tell me this was all for the best, that clearly it wasn't meant to be. The counselor came back on the line, said that given the extraordinary circumstances, they were willing to offer me late admission for the spring semester. I'd miss fall semester, but I could start in January if I still wanted to. I said yes immediately, didn't even hesitate. She said they'd send new paperwork, asked for an email address my mother didn't have access to. That night I started packing, threw clothes and books into suitcases, pulled money from my savings account, made plans to stay with a friend until I could figure out housing near campus. My mum tried to stop me, said I was being impulsive, that I'd regret this. I told her the only thing I regretted was not checking her closet sooner. Before I left, I did one more thing, set up my phone to record, asked my mum to explain why she'd hidden the letters. She admitted everything on camera, said she'd done it because she couldn't stand the thought of me leaving, that she'd worked so hard to keep me close and Stanford would ruin that. Said she'd do it again because that's what mothers do. They protect their children from bad decisions. I posted that video on Facebook, tagged extended family members, family friends, people from church, everyone who'd watched me grow up. Wrote a caption explaining that my mother had stolen my college acceptance letter and sabotaged my future to keep me geographically close to her. The response was immediate and brutal. Family members who'd always thought my mum was overbearing finally had proof. Friends calling her selfish and manipulative. My aunt commenting that she'd always suspected my mum had control issues, but never imagined it went this far. The family didn't disown me. They disowned her, stopped inviting her to gatherings, stopped taking her calls, made it clear that what she'd done was unforgivable. She tried to spin it as me being ungrateful, as her trying to protect me, but the video didn't lie. Her own words condemned her. I moved to California 3 weeks later, spent full semester working and preparing, started at Stanford in January. It was everything I'd imagined and more, made friends, found my people, threw myself into studies I actually cared about. Graduated last year with honors, got into a master's program, built a life on the opposite side of the country from where I'd started. I haven't been home since the day I left with those suitcases. My mom sends emails sometimes that I don't read, Calls from numbers I don't recognize that I don't answer. She lost her daughter the day she decided her need for control mattered more than my future. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. While my mum was sabotaging my future, my coworker's husband was sabotaging his marriage in my DMs, and I made sure HR got front row seats. My coworker Jennifer seemed like someone who had it all figured out. She was always talking about her husband Mike, showing us photos of their 2 kids, sharing stories about their perfect suburban life with the white picket fence and the golden retriever. Every Monday morning she'd come in with stories about family dinners and weekend trips to the farmer's market. It was wholesome in that slightly annoying way that makes you wonder if anyone's life is really that perfect, but I was happy for her. She seemed genuinely content. Then one day, Mike started following me on Instagram. I accepted because it seemed innocent enough. He was my coworker's husband. We'd met briefly at a company holiday party. He probably just wanted to be friendly. A lot of my coworkers' spouses followed me on social media. It wasn't weird. The first DM came about a week later. Just a comment on one of my workout photos. Something like, "Wow, you're really dedicated to fitness. That's impressive." I replied with a polite thanks, didn't think much of it. Then another message a few days later, complimenting my hair in a photo I'd posted. Then comments about how Jennifer was lucky to work with someone so beautiful and talented. The messages were getting progressively less appropriate, crossing from friendly into flirtatious territory. I stopped responding, but the messages kept coming. He started asking personal questions. Was I seeing anyone? What did I like to do for fun? Would I want to grab coffee sometime, just the 2 of us? The coffee suggestion made my stomach turn. This was my coworker's husband actively trying to meet up with me behind her back. Then the messages got explicit. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but they were graphic, sexual, completely out of line. Propositions about what he wanted to do with me, suggestions about hotels we could meet at, times when Jennifer would be at work and unavailable. The audacity of him hitting on his wife's coworker through Instagram DMs was actually breathtaking. I screenshot every single message, made a folder on my phone with timestamps, made sure I had proof of everything. Then I went directly to Jennifer, pulled her aside in the break room, told her we needed to talk privately. We went to an empty conference room and I showed her my phone. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't get angry at Mike. She got angry at me, called me a liar, said I was clearly jealous of her marriage and her happy family life, accused me of fabricating the messages somehow to break them up. Mike would never do this, she kept saying. You must have photoshopped these or something. You probably sent him messages first and now you're trying to make him look bad. The denial was intense. I tried to show her the message thread, proved that I'd never initiated any contact, that every message had come from him unsolicited. She wouldn't look, just kept shaking her head, saying I was jealous and pathetic, and she couldn't believe I'd stooped this low. Then she went to our boss, filed a formal complaint saying I was harassing her husband, that I'd been sending him inappropriate messages, and when he rejected me, I tried to turn it around on him. She actually made herself cry in our boss's office, played the victim so convincingly, I almost wondered if I was the one who'd gotten the situation wrong. Our boss called me in the next day, asked for my side of the story. I pulled out my phone and showed him everything. Every unsolicited message from Mike, the timestamps proving I hadn't responded to the explicit ones, proof that Mike had found my Instagram through Jennifer's company profile that listed her coworkers. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. My boss asked if I'd be willing to forward everything to HR. I said absolutely, sent every screenshot, wrote a detailed timeline of events, explained that I'd gone to Jennifer first to handle it privately and she'd accused me of lying. HR took it seriously, started an investigation immediately. That's when everything unraveled. Turns out I wasn't the only one. HR started quietly asking around, discovered that Mike had done this exact thing to 3 other women in our company, found them through their connections to Jennifer, sent them inappropriate messages, tried to set up meetings. One woman had blocked him immediately. Another had told her boyfriend who'd wanted to confront Mike, but she'd talked him out of it. A third had been so uncomfortable she'd actually requested a transfer to a different department to avoid seeing Jennifer and being reminded of it. 4 women total, all co-workers or former co-workers of Jennifer's, all targeted by her husband through social media. The pattern was undeniable. HR called Jennifer in, presented the evidence, told her she needed to take a leave of absence while they figured out how to handle the situation. They couldn't fire her for her husband's behavior, but having her in the office while this was being investigated created a hostile work environment for the women he'd harassed. Jennifer took a 2-month leave. During that time, apparently she finally confronted Mike with all the evidence HR had compiled. He couldn't deny it, couldn't gaslight his way out of screenshots from multiple women. She filed for divorce within 3 weeks. The divorce was apparently brutal. Jennifer's lawyer used all those messages, all that proof of infidelity and harassment, to get her a settlement that left Mike with almost nothing. She got the house, primary custody of the kids, most of their savings. Mike moved into a studio apartment and started working at a gas station because his previous job in sales had mysteriously dried up once word got around about why his wife had divorced him. Jennifer came back to work after her leave looking different, thinner, tired, but somehow more solid, like she'd had something rotten cut out of her life. She pulled me aside on her first day back and apologized, said she'd been in denial, that Mike had been cheating for years, and she'd convinced herself everything was fine because acknowledging it meant blowing up her whole life. Said she was sorry for calling me a liar, for reporting me, for choosing to believe her husband over clear evidence. She thanked me, said if I hadn't gone to HR, if I hadn't pushed the issue, she'd probably still be living in that lie. The messages I'd forwarded, combined with the other women coming forward, had given her the ammunition she needed for a good divorce settlement, had proven a pattern of behavior that her lawyer used to paint Mike as an unfaithful spouse who'd violated their marriage repeatedly. We're not friends exactly, but we're cordial now. Professional. She seems happier, actually. Lighter without the weight of pretending her marriage was perfect. She's dating someone new, someone she met through a divorced parents support group. She talks about her kids more and her relationship less, which feels healthier. Mike's working at a gas station last I heard. His social media is private now, probably learned his lesson about sliding into DMs, or maybe he's just gotten better at hiding it. Either way, he's not my problem, and he's not Jennifer's problem anymore. The whole situation taught me that some people would rather shoot the messenger than face the message. Jennifer's initial reaction, choosing to believe her lying husband over documented proof, wasn't about me. It was about her not being ready to face the truth of her marriage. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can accept reality. And my screenshots just happened to be the catalyst for her to finally see what had been in front of her all along. Mike learned that screenshots last forever, and so did my brother's girlfriend when I decided to catfish her, using the one person she'd never expect. My brother's girlfriend, Amber, had been dating him for about 1.5 years when things started going wrong with my credit. She was around constantly, had a key to our parents' house where I still lived while finishing grad school, was always sweet and helpful and trustworthy. The kind of person who'd offer to help with dishes after family dinners, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who seemed genuinely invested in becoming part of our family. My brother was crazy about her, talked about proposing, about building a future together. Then I started getting credit card statements for accounts I'd never opened. First one I thought was a mistake, called the company, explained I hadn't applied for this card. They said someone had definitely applied using my information, that the card had been active for 3 months with a balance of $8,000. I froze. Asked them to send me the application details. The signature wasn't mine, but it was close enough that someone had clearly practiced forging it. I pulled my credit report and my stomach dropped. 7 credit cards I'd never opened, 3 personal loans, a car loan for a vehicle I'd never seen. My credit score had tanked from 720 to 490 in the span of 6 months. Someone had systematically destroyed my financial life, and I had no idea who or how. I filed police reports, started documenting everything, hired a credit repair specialist who cost money I didn't have. The debt totaled around $70,000, all in my name, all from accounts opened in the past year. The specialist asked who had access to my personal documents, who could have gotten my social security number, my birth certificate, copies of my driver's license. I started thinking about who'd been in the house regularly. My family, obviously, but they had no reason to steal my identity. Friends visited sometimes but didn't have unsupervised access to my room, where I kept important documents. Then it hit me. Amber. She was over constantly, often when I wasn't home, had been trusted with a key, could have easily gone through my things without anyone questioning why she was in my room. I set up a hidden camera in my bedroom, one of those nanny cams that looks like a phone charger. Didn't tell anyone, just wanted to see if my suspicion had any merit. 2 days later, I reviewed the footage and there she was, Amber, in my room while everyone else was downstairs watching a game, going through my desk drawers, photographing documents with her phone, my social security card, my birth certificate, bank statements I'd left in a folder. The betrayal was stunning. This woman my brother loved, who we'd welcomed into our family, who'd sat at our dinner table and smiled and laughed, was systematically stealing my identity to fund a lifestyle I didn't even know she was living. I confronted her at a family barbecue, pulled her aside, showed her a screenshot from the camera footage on my phone. Watched her face go from confused to pale to panicked in about 5 seconds. She started crying immediately, begging me not to make a scene, saying she'd pay everything back, that she'd made a terrible mistake and was so sorry. "How much do you owe?" I asked. She wouldn't give me a straight answer, just kept crying and apologizing. "Please don't tell your brother," she said. "Please, I love him so much. This will ruin everything. I'll fix it, I promise. Just give me time." I called the police right there. Didn't even go back to the barbecue, just walked to my car, dialed the non-emergency line, explained I had evidence of identity theft and knew who'd done it. 2 officers came to the house within an hour. Amber tried to run when she saw the police car, actually tried to leave out the back door. My brother stopped her, confused and scared, asking what was going on. The officers arrested her on the spot once I showed them the camera footage and the credit reports. She was still crying, still begging, now saying she'd done it because she had gambling debts, because she was in trouble with loan sharks, because she needed the money and didn't know what else to do. None of it was my problem. She'd made her choices and now she had to face the consequences. But that wasn't even the worst part. Before she was officially booked and charged, while she was out on bail for a few days waiting for her court date, I decided I wanted the full truth. Wanted to know everything she'd done, everyone she'd scammed, the full extent of her deception. So I created a fake dating profile on the app she used constantly, used my real photos, my real first name, created a persona of someone confident and successful, and exactly her type based on what I knew she was attracted to. Matched with her within hours. She had no idea she was talking to me. The profile looked nothing like how I usually presented myself online. Different style, different energy. Started flirting, being charming, asking questions about her life. She ate it up, clearly desperate for attention and validation, while her actual relationship with my brother was falling apart. Over the course of 3 days, I got her to confess everything. And here's where it gets absurd. She admitted to the identity theft in detail, talking about how easy it was to steal from this girl I know, because she was too trusting. Bragged about having scammed other people too, friends from high school, an ex-boyfriend, random people she'd befriended online. Mentioned she'd been cheating on my brother for months with some guy from her gym, because my brother was too nice and she needed excitement. I screenshot every single message, every confession, every detail, every admission of fraud and infidelity. Then I sent it all to the prosecutor handling her case. They were thrilled, said this was evidence of a pattern of behavior, of premeditation, of her being a serial scammer with no remorse. Added charges. The prosecutor told me it would likely add years to her sentence if convicted. Amber's lawyer tried to argue the catfishing made the confessions inadmissible, that I had entrapped her somehow. The judge disagreed, said she'd voluntarily confessed to crimes without any coercion, that the fact she'd been talking to a fake profile didn't make her admissions any less real. She was talking to what she thought was a stranger, admitting to serious crimes, showing clear consciousness of guilt. She was convicted on 14 counts of identity theft, fraud, and related charges. Got sentenced to 8 years in prison, would likely serve 5 with good behavior. My brother was devastated, felt betrayed and stupid for not seeing the signs. I felt bad for him, but also relieved that she was finally facing real consequences. The restitution process took months. Amber had spent the money on stupid things, designer bags and trips and casino losses. Nothing left to recover. I had to spend a year working with credit agencies, filing disputes, providing evidence that I hadn't opened those accounts. Slowly my credit score came back up. Accounts got closed. The debts got marked as fraudulent. My brother thanked me eventually, once the shock wore off and he realized I'd saved him from marrying someone who would have destroyed his life too. He's dating someone new now, much more careful about who he trusts, asks more questions about people's pasts. Amber sent me letters from prison for the first year, apologizing, explaining, asking for forgiveness. I never responded. Some people think that's cruel, that everyone deserves a chance at redemption. But she didn't just make one mistake. She systematically stole my identity, destroyed my credit, put me in debt I didn't create, and only showed remorse when she got caught. That's not someone who deserves my forgiveness. My credit's fixed now, scores back up over 700. All the fraudulent accounts are closed and marked appropriately. I still check my credit report monthly, still keep my important documents locked up, still have trust issues with people who seem too good to be true. Justice feels good. Amber stole years of financial stability from me, but she lost her own freedom in return. The math works out. Amber stole my identity, but my father-in-law thought he could steal my dignity until I reminded him exactly who he was dealing with. My father-in-law, Richard, never thought I was good enough for his son. From the moment my husband brought me home to meet his parents, Richard made it clear I wasn't what he'd envisioned for his precious only child. I wasn't from the right family, didn't have the right pedigree, hadn't gone to the right schools. My career in nonprofit work was, in his words, admirable but not practical. What he really meant was I didn't make enough money to meet his standards. Family dinners at their house were exercises in endurance. Richard would ask me questions designed to make me look stupid or uninformed. Pop quizzes about classical literature he knew I hadn't read. Political debates where he'd talk over me and then claim I didn't have strong enough opinions. Comments about how my career choice showed a lack of ambition. My husband would defend me, tell his father to back off, but Richard never stopped. He seemed to view me as some kind of project, someone who needed to be broken down and rebuilt to his specifications. The worst part was how he did it all with this veneer of concern. He'd frame his insults as advice, his criticisms as helpful observations. "I'm just trying to help you improve yourself," he'd say when I'd call out his behavior. Successful people accept constructive criticism, like there was anything constructive about constantly being told you weren't good enough. My husband and I had been married for 2 years when Richard decided to escalate from verbal jabs to actual interference in my life. He'd been going on about respect lately, about how young people today didn't understand the importance of respecting their elders, about how I specifically needed to learn my place in the family hierarchy. I'd mostly ignored it, figured it was just more of his usual condescending nonsense. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I got detained at my office parking lot by police. They said my car had been reported stolen, that the registered owner had called it in. I was confused, showed them my registration, my license, proof that this was my car that I'd owned for 4 years. They seemed skeptical, made me wait in their patrol car while they verified everything, called the number that had reported the vehicle stolen. 3 hours. I sat there for 3 hours while they sorted it out, missing important meetings, humiliated in front of my coworkers who could see me through the office windows, sitting in the back of a police car. Finally, they let me go, said there'd been a misunderstanding, that the person who called it in had made a mistake. I knew immediately it was Richard. My husband's name was on the car registration as a co-owner from when he'd helped me buy it, and Richard had access to all of his son's paperwork. When I got home and told my husband what happened, he called his father. Richard played dumb, said he'd seen a car that looked like mine in a bad neighborhood and thought it had been stolen, that he was just trying to help. The explanation was flimsy, but just plausible enough that my husband wanted to believe it was a genuine mistake. I knew better. This was Richard's idea of teaching me a lesson, showing me that he had power over my life, that he could make things difficult for me whenever he wanted. The smugness in his voice when he offered his fake apology at the next family dinner confirmed it. That's when I decided to dig. I'd spent 2 years being the bigger person, swallowing insults, trying to win over a man who was never going to accept me. I was done playing nice. If Richard wanted to play games, I'd show him exactly what kind of opponent he'd chosen. I started with public records. Richard owned a commercial real estate company, something he loved to brag about at dinners, loved to use as evidence that he was smarter and more successful than everyone else. I pulled the company's financial statements, the ones that were publicly available, started comparing them to property records and business filings. The numbers didn't add up. I went deeper, created fake credentials, posed as a potential investor, requested more detailed financial information, hired a forensic accountant friend to look at everything I'd compiled. What we found was beautiful in its criminality. Richard had been embezzling from his own company for years, siphoning money into offshore accounts, hiding assets from his business partners, cooking the books to cover his tracks. He'd also been hiding money from his wife, maintaining a second set of finances she knew nothing about. The man who'd spent 2 years lecturing me about ethics and responsibility and doing things the right way was a fraud. I compiled everything: bank statements, financial records, proof of offshore accounts, documented patterns of embezzlement going back almost a decade. Then I sent it all anonymously to his business partners and to the IRS. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. The IRS launched an investigation within weeks. His business partners, once they saw the evidence of what Richard had been stealing from them, filed a lawsuit and forced him out of the company. The forensic audit they ordered uncovered even more fraud than I'd found. Richard's carefully constructed empire started crumbling immediately. His wife found out about the hidden money during the investigation, found out he'd been lying to her about their finances, stashing money away while claiming the company was struggling. She filed for divorce before the federal charges were even finalized, got herself a ruthless lawyer who made sure she got everything in the settlement. The house, the legitimate savings, the cars, everything Richard hadn't already hidden in accounts that were now frozen by the government. The federal charges came down about 6 months after I'd sent that initial tip. Wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, a whole list of white-collar crimes that could put him away for years. Richard tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. The paper trail was too clear, too well documented. His lawyers advised him to take a plea deal. Then things went from bad to unhinged. Richard showed up at our house one night, looking 20 years older than he had 6 months ago. Asked if he could speak to me privately. My husband was hesitant, but I said okay, curious to hear what he had to say. We sat in the living room and Richard tried to apologize. Said he'd been wrong about me, that he'd let his ego and his prejudices cloud his judgment, that he was sorry for how he'd treated me. I let him finish his whole speech, let him talk about how he'd lost everything, how he'd made mistakes, how he hoped we could move past this. Then I smiled sweetly and said, "Consider this a lesson in respecting people, regardless of their background or bank account. You spent 2 years trying to teach me lessons about my place. I hope you've learned something about yours." His face went from apologetic to furious. He started to say something, stopped himself, stood up and walked out. That was 8 months ago. He hasn't spoken to me since, hasn't come to family dinners, hasn't called, hasn't acknowledged my existence. My husband's relationship with him is basically non-existent now. Just occasional brief phone calls where Richard complains about his legal situation and my husband offers minimal sympathy. Richard's company collapsed completely. His former partners liquidated everything, used the proceeds to pay back investors and cover legal fees. He's facing federal prison time, probably 3 to 5 years if his plea deal goes through. His ex-wife got remarried recently, sent us a cheerful announcement like she was celebrating her freedom. My husband struggles with it sometimes, mourning the father he thought he had before realizing who Richard really was. Part of me feels guilty for being the catalyst that destroyed my father-in-law's life, but the larger part of me knows I didn't destroy anything. Richard destroyed himself. I just made sure the consequences caught up with him. He'd built his success on fraud and theft and arrogance, treated people like they were beneath him while breaking every rule he claimed to value. The fact that his downfall started with him underestimating his daughter-in-law is just poetic justice. Sometimes the best revenge is just exposing the truth and letting it do the work for you. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just letting people face the natural consequences of their own terrible choices. Whether it's a roommate's creepy boyfriend, a lying stepmom, or a father-in-law who underestimated the wrong daughter-in-law, the truth always finds its way to the surface. If you've made it this far into tonight's chaos, thank you for being here. Drop a comment telling me which story shocked you the most, and I'll see you in the next one. Sleep well, and remember, always trust your instincts, document everything, and never let anyone gaslight you into doubting what you know is true. Until next time.